I call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Trustees, Board of Education, for this Tuesday, December 11th, 2018. We will now stand and rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches. Si alguien prefiere escuchar esta presentación en español, tenemos interpretación disponible. Gracias.
Thank you, and we have headsets for the hearing impaired. They are available, so please indicate if you need a headset. If there's anyone out there. All right. We will now move to the administration of oath and of office, and we have Ms. Kate Ford and Ms. Rosemary Munoz, and we have Mr. Matsuoka, who will be leading that on.
So I would like to invite Kate Ford to step down from the dais and invite Kristen Snedden up to administer the oath of office.
I, Kate Ford. I, Kate Ford, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Thank you, Christine.
So now we invite Rose Munoz to step down from the dais, and her daughter, Yesenia Munoz, will deliver the oath of office.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Rose Munoz,
I, Rose Munoz,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear that I
will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies,
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution
of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
and that I will well and purposely discharge the duties about which I'm about to enter. Thank you.
right, well, that's very exciting, and I welcome to the dais Ms. Munoz and Ms. Ford. Thank you. So moving forward, announcement of closed session action. We are reporting out case number 2018-19-T12 was approved. Moving forward to number 7, Superintendent's report. Mr. Matsuoka.
I have no report tonight.
All right, moving now to board comments and correspondence. And I just wanted to say that it has been an honor and privilege to be the president of the board this year. We don't know who's going to be nominated for elections today, but it's been an honor and privilege to have been in this position this year. And we've had an exciting year. So looking forward to a new year and new opportunities with our board and with our district, working together as a team. I also wanted to note that since our last meeting, we had our coffee with the board at Monroe Elementary, and Ms. Capps and I attended that. And what was exciting about it was not only did we have parent involvement, but we had 2 students. And one was Oscar Gillespie, who is the student council president, and Soraya Narciso Ortega, who is the student council historian, who was videotaping us very closely. I was like, back up, you can videotape a little further away. But what's great about the students, and Oscar asked some really relevant questions. And one of the questions that stood out for me was, he asked, when are we going to have non-gendered bathrooms? So we actually had a discussion about that, and I thought that was a really, this was a 3rd grade student. So these are issues that are happening in our elementary schools that we need to be aware of and that we need to be thinking about and talking about. So I'm hoping that we can continue to have the coffee with the board, whoever. But it's been, I think, a great opportunity for us to have dialogues with our families and students, and it's difficult sometimes to get to know us when we're sitting up here on the dais. So it's actually, we get to be there and answer questions and talk with people. So I'm hoping that we might have that opportunity to do that. So now moving forward to public comments for non-agenda matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Education.
We have 2 items for request to speak. Let's see, Ellen Hunter, to be followed by Albert Olton.
Good evening, school board members, superintendent, and fellow community members. So glad to hear that you were at Monroe. I knew you were there, and I heard it went really well. I'm a teacher at Monroe. I'm also a parent of 3 children, and also a member of the Santa Barbara chapter of the Climate Reality Project, which is an international group led by former Vice President Al Gore, and it consists of scientists, activists, organizers, business and cultural leaders, all committed to a sustainable future. I spoke at the October 23rd meeting requesting that you take action on climate change awareness by signing a Schools for Climate Action resolution. I'm back tonight to follow up on that. I had sent a couple of emails, and I'm hoping that you will help break the silence on climate change and stand up for our children. 27 other school boards, including San Francisco, San Diego, Portland, Seattle, Sonoma, just to name a few, have signed similar climate change resolutions. By signing, you'd be agreeing with 97% of international scientists that climate change is real and that you refuse to be a silent bystander. Remember, we are mandated reporters, and it is our job to protect our children in the community. And it's an injustice to stand by and act as if in our very own community climate change isn't here, as we know it is, and it's affecting us, and it has. It's right before our eyes. We're already leaving a great burden for our children, so it's time we acknowledge this and help our children become better equipped to be change agents for a sustainable future. Now, the good news is that SB Unified is already moving towards many efforts to teach our children about sustainability through our various school garden programs, our amazing food services department, and I was also excited to see that you are considering to use the land at Hidden Valley as an outdoor garden. That was very exciting. Perfect opportunity to teach our children about environmental literacy, climate change literacy, sustainability. That's what we want to be doing, so thank you. As you probably know right now, leaders from around the world are meeting in Poland at the COP24 Climate Change Conference. They're gathering to discuss immediate ways to draw down carbon in the atmosphere. And education is at the forefront of this conference. UN leaders are asking community leaders like yourself to develop and implement educational programs on climate change. You are the community leaders that the United Nations leaders from around the world are talking about. So you can take action by signing a resolution to the first steps of creating awareness. I don't know about you, but I want my children and all of my students to be aware and learn to take action. Thank you so much for all you do in the community, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I actually have a sample resolution, once again, that I'm going to give to you so you can
Thank you.
have a copy of it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That concludes the public comment.
Thank you very much. Do we have more?
Oh, after Albert. Albert.
Okay, guys, I'm going to start off with a quiz. Pop quiz. If you had a student at the UC who got an F on one test and an A plus on another, what's their average grade? It's not a rhetorical question, Laura. Can you tell me what their average grade is? It's a C. If you had another child at SB Unified who got an F on one test and an A plus on another, what's their grade? Well, it depends. If they got a 0, the average of an F and an A is still an F. In fact, in order for that child to make up that 0, and if they're a high-performing child, they would have to get 10 A pluses to overcome that 1 0. If you had a B child and they happen to have 1 0 in a test, they have to get 10 Bs in a row to overcome that 1 0. It is a 10-point system. It is not a 5-point system, and it is especially punitive against kids. So I am here today to request that SB Unified change their grading system to the traditional 5-point scale, the standard used by almost all colleges in the United States. The simplest way to make that adjustments is for tests and assignments. The lowest score a student can receive is a 55. Here are the reasons why SB Unified should change their grading methodology. The current SB Unified grading system is punitive. Getting a 0 on homework or test assignment SB Unified is like getting an F plus an additional -5 grading points to make sure the kids that struggled not only sucked, but they sucked a lot, and make it very difficult for them to recover. The current grading system is a poor measure of a student's aptitude, unfairly and excessively punishing them with 0s, and for high-performing students would require 10 A pluses to get an A back, and for many other capable students, potentially devastating for college opportunities. The current SB Unified system does not conform to grading system used by colleges or college admission officers. Admission officers won't know that in order for a kid to overcome a 0 score, that student would have to have scored 10 A pluses to get their grade back up to an A. If they had 9 A pluses and a B with that 0, it's still a B. The SB Unified current system for grading is not transparent. Parents may think the grading scale is A through F, but it is not. 40% is a G, 30% is an H, 20% a J, 10% a K, and 0% an L. By allowing teachers to assign scores lower than 55% and then allowing them to average them with other grades at SB Unified is using a 10-point scale, not a 5-point scale. The current grading system is demotivating, inspiring despair, not motivation. Imagine the kid who gets a 0 on a test, studies hard, and gets a B on the next test. They still have an F. What if they got an A plus, still an F? 2 Bs in your F, you got a D.
30 seconds.
Worse, the current grading system amplifies anxiety and mental health issues already prevalent among high school kids. Finally, the burden of this grading system falls most heavily on the students with the least advantages in school, ESL kids, ADHD kids, single-parent family kids, with no time to check and learn the Byzantine labyrinth of Neo to make sure their kids are prepared for tests. 6 teachers that put their weekly assignments in 6 different places, an average of 3 different applications needed to complete an assignment, transferred into an application called Notes, followed by multiple screenshots of each page of your work, uploaded 1 page at a time for each class.
Albert, can you submit the rest of it and we'll read it?
Yes.
So that we keep on time.
We are measuring kids' abilities to follow instructions, not to think and learn.
Okay, thank you.
Please change it or defend it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Moving forward to acceptance of donations, do we have a motion?
Yes, I move to accept with gratitude the donations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving forward to our annual organization meeting. We will now move to the election of officers for president, vice president, and clerk, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Matsuoka.
Is there a motion for the office of president?
Yes, with a lot of gratitudes for our outgoing president, Dr. Reed. It's a tremendously hard job. It's about doubles the type of work and responsibility that we all serve here. I would like to nominate Wendy Sims-Moten as president, incoming president.
And I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Congratulations, Madam President.
Thank you. I think after that intro, I was like, well, Lord, wait a minute. Turns that I also want to just express my gratitude for your great leadership throughout the year. And I also just want to talk about, did you notice 5 awesome ladies on this dais? I just want to give a hand for the ladies. So I'm looking forward to serving this year and absolutely honored and proud to do so. So thank you.
All right, with that, we will switch seats. We're going to do musical chairs now.
Here you go. And I'll now turn the meeting over to President Sims-Moten, and she'll conduct the rest of the election of officers.
Thank you. So do I hear a nomination for vice president of the board this year?
Yes. I would like to nominate for vice president Ms. Capps.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. One more change of seats.
Thank you. And thank you. I'm looking forward to this role. Just to explain, the vice president actually helps conduct public comment, which is my favorite part of the meeting. It's so nice that you are all here tonight, and it's such a meaningful aspect of our board meetings is to actually hear from you all. So that's one little piece of what I get to do now as vice president. Thank you.
Okay. One more. I'd like to hear a nomination for, are you guys want to switch seats? Sure. Before? Okay.
I'm just going to keep moving down.
Next, we'll have a nomination for the clerk of the board. I think I'll make that nomination. I'd like to nominate Dr. Jackie Reed for clerk of the board for the year 2019. Do I hear a second?
I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. Ms. Ford, did I hear your?
Aye.
Aye. Better make sure we're inclusionary here now. Gotta work it out. So, thank you so much. So we have our board seated, our president, our vice president, our clerk, and our wonderful 2 new members that are joining the board.
I was just going to say, too, that I appreciate having been vice president, president, and now clerk, and it's an honor. It's an honor and privilege, so thank you.
We also need to swap some nameplates around.
Well, we can keep it interesting, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right, so the next item up for action is approval of dates and times of the regularly scheduled board meetings through June 30th, 2020, or 2020, and the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, commencing at 6:30 p.m. They have been designated for as the regularly scheduled meetings of the Board of Education, with the following exceptions. Did you have some, Dr. Matsuoka?
So we've set up the same rhythm of most of our months have due 2 board meetings, and there are some where we just do one, such as this month, December, November, July. Also, April, we have to slide things around because of spring break. And so this is really 18 months out, but we think it's important for the board and the community to know when those board meetings are scheduled. So are there any comments, questions about the schedule? Okay.
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next, appointment of a representative to elect members of the Santa Barbara County Committee on School District Organization. The Board of Education must select one of its members to serve as district representative for the purpose of electing members as required to the County Committee on School District Organization. An alternate may also be chosen. Mr. Matsuoka.
So this is a committee that in my 2.5 years has not met. It's a rare occurrence for this committee to be called, and it's for the purposes of when there's a change in school boundaries. So like, let's say this property goes from one school district to another. It's very rare that it happens. It's usually a big deal when it does because it involves residents, it involves taxes. So we need a representative in case the committee is called. But in my 2.5 years, that committee has not had to convene.
So, Mr. Matsuoka, this isn't the one that meets in Buellton?
This is not. That is
Okay.
the Santa Barbara County School Boards Association, which does meet monthly.
Any volunteers?
I'm happy to do it. That kind of committee.
Okay. Of course, you know, they'll have a whole bunch of meetings now that you volunteer. Okay. Do we need a motion to do that? Okay. So do we have a motion to accept Ms. Capps volunteer for this committee?
Yes, I so moved.
So, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So you're now on that committee. Okay, great. Moving on to item D. There are a number of committees to which board members are appointed. At the annual organizational meeting, the board appoints board members to the following committees. The district committees are the Audit Committee, the Graduation Requirements Committee, the Staff and Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, Sustainability Committee, the Wellness Committee, and the community groups are Santa Barbara Education Foundation, South Coast Task Force on Youth Safety, and the charter school liaisons are Adelante Charter School and Santa Barbara Charter School. So it's open for discussion and where you'd like to serve.
So I'm going to jump in and say that I would be really interested in serving on the Graduation Requirements Committee again.
Okay. And last we had Ishmael, who was the second to that. So would anyone else like to be on that committee as well? So, second.
I would be interested.
Okay. Rose? Okay. And our audit committee? Did we
Madam
just-
Chair, I'd like to volunteer for that committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I would like to continue serving on that as well. So, okay, did you have something you were going to say?
No.
Okay, so moving down to the Staff and Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, the CPAC. You're serving on that committee? Okay. We can come back to that.
No, I'm happy to
You're happy to?
volunteer for that.
Okay. And if someone later decides to also be a backup to that, that'd be great. And next is our Sustainability Committee.
Well, just a clarification, I believe that the Sustainability and Wellness Committee is one. That's what I've been, I don't know of another sustainability. I've been actively
Right.
participating in the Wellness Committee, and we've been doing sustainability efforts through that committee.
It is one of the things that we are
Yeah.
looking at in wellness in relation to food services and so forth, so, and it's one of the pillars.
So is there any reason why those two committees can't be combined and it could be the Wellness and Sustainability Committee since
they're kind of crossing over, or?
I have no objection to that.
And I don't believe that there's another
Yeah,
sustainability
I
committee.
don't-
That's my question. Okay, so I'm happy to continue my service
Okay,
on
Yeah.
that combined committee.
okay.
But if anyone else wants to join, there's a lot of new energy around around this one.
Actually, I would love to.
Great.
Okay. All right. Moving on to our community groups, the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. I would like to volunteer and serve on that committee this year. I know Mr. Ish was on that committee last year, so we certainly have an opening for others if you decide later to add to that committee. Okay. And then at the South Coast Task Force on Leaf Safety. Any volunteers as we bring
I
up
might
the?
volunteer for that one. That meets quarterly, is my understanding.
Yes. Any others would like to serve on it as well? There's a room for an alternate as well. Okay, just know that that opening is there to do that if you decide later. Okay, so the charter school liaisons, Adelante Charter School, it's open for liaison from the board.
I've been serving as a liaison. It's a wonderful school. I'm happy to continue, but if anyone would like to, it's a nice way to serve. The meetings are in the evenings, which is a little challenging for me. But if anyone would like to do it, otherwise I'll continue to serve.
So, and what does that actually, I mean, what the liaison, what does it actually do in terms of the service of the board member? Is it something we need to continue? I know it started some time ago when these were new, but is that something we need to continue doing, or?
I think it's valuable because I'm just in touch with the board chair. If I'm not at a meeting, I tend to meet with him for coffee. A lot of changes at Adelante have been happening and help them sort of understand the board process because they're not as directly involved.
Okay.
So I'm happy to do it with you, so that we
Sure.
could maybe take turns, if that works, so that if it's difficult in the evenings, but I would be very interested in being involved.
Great.
Okay. All right, so we have Ms. Capps and Dr. Reed serving on that committee. And then finally, the Santa Barbara Charter School.
I'd like to do that.
Ms. Ford. Okay. Any additional want to volunteer to be part of that committee?
Is that meeting also in the evening?
I'm not sure when that one meets, do you know?
I think their meeting is at 4:30.
If you need time to think about it in terms of scheduling, that'd be great. Okay, let me just reiterate again which committees you're on and correct me where I need to be corrected. So on the audit committee will be Ms. Ford and myself. The graduation committee will continue with Dr. Jackie Reed along with Ms. Munoz, who is serving on that committee. We're still, Dr. Ford's, Dr. Ford, I'm projecting what you're going to be, Dr. Ford. Ms. Ford will.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll be serving on the special educate, the CPAC, and along there's another opportunity if someone else later wants to decide to be a part of that committee. The Sustainability and Wellness Committee will now be combined, and Ms. Capps will continue to serve as that, as well as on Dr. Reed this year. In the community groups, we have Santa Barbara Education Foundation, where myself, and was there someone else going to serve with me on that one? Or were we just waiting to see? Okay. All right, and the South Coast Task Force Youth Safety is Dr. Reed. Good on that one? Okay. And then the school liaison, Adelante, Laura is going to continue, Ms. Capps going to continue, as well as Dr. Reed joining her this year. And then Ms. Ford will be on the Santa Barbara Charter School as liaison. Did I capture that correctly? Okay. And I think we had sent out in the packet the list of the descriptions of those committees. So thank you for your service, and we'll be moving on to our next agenda item. So next we're moving to the consent agenda item. I'd like to ask if any of the board members have any items to pull.
I do.
Okay.
Agenda item 8.
8, okay.
Staff would like to pull item 13.
Okay. And I would like to pull items combined, have the same questions for items 6 and 7. Generally, we do bring them back at the end, but if there's short questions that we can take care of right now, are there short questions that we can do, or do we need to bring them back later?
Well, I don't know how short it is. I guess I could ask a couple of questions now.
Okay, so I have 6 and 7, and I think your item is number 8. The
Yeah.
question that I had on 6 and 7 for staff is that I noticed that each of them are getting an increase, and I was just wondering what that increase was going to be allocated to.
Good evening, Ms. Sims-Moulton. I would have to come back to you on more details around the proposed expenditures for those increases, although I know that traditionally what we have done is to help shore up any costs around staffing.
Okay. And is this an annual amendment? Do they do that? I didn't know this came last year, and so I was just wondering if this is an annual piece, and so if we could just add what you traditionally do with it, unless it's something specifically that you're going to do differently than you have. So if we could just add that to the fiscal impact would be great.
Yes, it is. It is an annual amendment, and
Okay.
we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm fine with it. So I'm going to come back to you in terms of that. So is item 13, just want to pull it, or is there a short discussion on it?
Just a short comment. So in item 13, you will find a purchase order with Scott and Sons Electric and around the efforts of sustainability. This is to install our first electric car charging station in the district. Now, board members, you're going to have to give up your parking spot because that's the closest to the building, so we're going to run a conduit, and we will add an electric car charging station. It will be used, they'll use ChargePoint, which is a fairly ubiquitous car charging platform. And we are making plans to install car charging systems across the district. So we just wanted to highlight that.
That's excellent. And if I can just clarify, is this part of that grant that helps, it was part of the Air Quality Control Board? No.
Nope, we're,
Okay.
maybe Mr. Vissolini can comment about that. Or you can come up to the podium.
We actually have 2 programs going right now. We are working at La Cumbra with the Air Pollution Control District on that grant program, so we're actually piloting 2. This one the district is paying for to get it in and done. And we were actually at La Cumbra with a representative from the company that works with the APCD this week.
That's great. Well, I'm thrilled about these car charging stations, and I hope that our employees are as happy as I am. Thanks.
So back to item 8, Dr. Reed, you want to discuss it
Yeah, I
now?
do have a few questions.
So do you want to wait and bring it back?
I'm
or-
wondering if that might be better. I don't know, Mr. Rickman might want to, I'm going to ask, and then if we think we need to go into further conversation. I see that Harding had previously had a .5 FTE Spanish teacher in instruction. I believe you're listed on this.
I think it's Mr. Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez. Sorry.
So Dr. Ramirez. And so I see that if they struggled to keep someone in place in that position. So my question first was why we weren't able to afford a 1.0 FTE Spanish teacher, why it had to be a 0.5.
So good evening, Ms. Dr. Reed. That was something that came up as a discussion more broadly around the entire instructional program. The IB Early Years program does call for the exploration of a second language. In this case, the language that has been a part of the instructional program has been Spanish. That .5 position has historically been there. A lot of it has been because of the ratio of just the school size and the extent to which that has been explored. We've tried to staff it at that particular staffing level and has proven to be very challenging. The other challenge that has emerged obviously is with satisfying components around the entire component of the instructional program relative to visual performing arts, PE, and other program offerings that are part of the entire base program. So this is another way that we've been trying to get to a level of exposure and awareness in a foreign language. The idea of mastery in that foreign language has not been something that has come to fruition with at least the design of the way in which that staff was traditionally carried out. The number of minutes are very limited, and so that's part of what kind of brought us to this point.
So I guess my question is then, has there been any research utilizing this Rosetta Stone in a school setting? I'm just wondering, has that been research that it's been successful in a school setting, in an elementary school baccalaureate program? And I guess I would just question too why we wouldn't want to look into first seeing if it might be possible to have a full-time teacher, Spanish teacher.
Let me address the first question about its effectiveness. The Harding is the only school that has that as a program offering, has language as a core program offering within our elementary schools around a world language. The extent to which Rosetta Stone has proven to be, or an online platform, has proven to be effective, I've seen it largely at a secondary level, not necessarily in the elementary space. So we wanted to try it this way with this model currently, but that is something we can certainly explore for the next hiring cycle if that proves to have limited exposure or limited in terms of the ability for students to access and entertain language.
Thank you. I just would think it would be important to have some understanding of the success rate or where it has been happening in other schools, just to get best practices of how that is being implemented. And I guess my other question would be, when do you foresee having if you're started, when are you thinking of starting this in the Rosetta Stone?
This item has been, we've been in discussions, I've been in discussions with Ms. Pinkley.
Okay.
Just back and forth around what the right scope of contract has been. That's why we landed on 1 year. We went back and forth with the provider on potentially a multi-year, and we didn't find that to be a good model for us, especially with more understanding and informing the practice. So we want to pursue this immediately. They're already set up with the hardware, and I think ETS would just be able to onboard it into their into the iPad, the devices rather quickly. So we can push this out as early as this week or the following. We wouldn't start to see it really take root until the turn of the calendar in January. But we would very quickly start to determine whether it's even a viable means to support the language component as part of the core program.
Thank you. I would just love to get a information back when you are planning to assess it, to give us an assessment of the success or not of the program, for us to consider either moving forward with that or maybe rethinking having a full-time staff person in that position teaching Spanish.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Additional questions or plan on that? Okay, I have a motion to.
Before we vote on the whole consent agenda item, Dr. Ramirez, items 6 and 7, are those time sensitive? Do we need the board to vote tonight and then we'll provide backup info later?
I believe so, because we're just trying to meet some deadlines, so we can certainly loop back with some information for the board.
Yeah, I'm okay with moving forward on that. I just think that it's come before us before, and that's always missing. So if we could just include that, if it's going to be an annual thing, if we could include that, and we don't have to pull it each time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so move approval. Can I get a motion to move approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. So next, we're moving to, actually just right on time, to our public hearing, so I'll close this meeting. And not as loudly as Dr. Reed, I will open the public hearing. Dr. Vecchio, the second reading of the sunshining of the California Schools Association for successor contract negotiation with the Sandoval Unified School District.
Thank you. Good evening. Congratulations, Ms. Sims-Moten, Ms. Capps, on your new appointment. Welcome, new board members. And thank you for your service, Dr. Reed, as president. This item before you is simply the second viewing of our CSEA's sunshine proposals for their negotiations for 1920. We would like to bring this back on action in January, and then that'll allow us to go forward with negotiations with CSEA after the first of the year.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Sounds good to me. We'll see it on January for action. Thank you. So now we'll close this public hearing and open back the public meeting. So now we'll be moving to item H, the action agenda, student discipline. In the case of 48918.
Good, we're skipping number 1.
Yes. 201819-10. Motion?
Yes, in the case of 201819-10, I move to approve for full expulsion for 2 semesters, which ends June 2019.
Second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next, H3, Board Student Discipline, case number 201819-15. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, in case 201819-15, I move to approve the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for 2 semesters, which ends June 2019.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Next, we're going to approval of the Santa Barbara Unified District proposal for successor contract negotiation with Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Vecchio.
Thank you very much. This is brought back to the board tonight for action. This is our sunshine proposal you've seen twice. It's for the negotiations with CSEA, and these are our openers.
Any comments or questions? This item? Do I hear a motion? Motion to approval of the Santa Barbara Unified School District proposal for successor contract negotiation with the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, and then item 6, approval of contract with Leadership Associates for the recruitment and hiring of the next principal at San Marcos High School. I believe we have some comments.
We have 3 public comment on this item.
Oh, did I miss an item?
Sorry, did you do both items?
Did I jump to number 5? I missed number 5?
Yeah, we should have the sunshine proposal up for action for SBTA and our items that we're going to negotiate with SBTA.
Okay, yeah, we're going to do that one too. So any comments or questions?
No.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now you can go.
Thank you.
Okay, now to number 6, approval of contract with Leadership Associates for the recruitment and hiring of the next principal at San Marcos High. And we have some comments to speak.
Okay, sorry, we're just trading our water glasses back. Okay, for this item, we have 3 public speakers. So I'm going to name them all, and you can get ready. First, we have Mike Wong. Next, we have Delene Bliss, and followed by Marcy Wimbish. Mike.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Mike Wong, and I am a parent of a senior and a freshman at San Marcos High School. Like many in the community, I was disappointed with the handling and the dismissal of our previous principal, Ed Behrens, and that it did not appear from your actions at the time that the voices of the San Marcos staff, students, or parents were heard. After reading the timeline for the search for a permanent principal at San Marcos, it seems little has changed. The timeline does not specifically call out the inclusion and involvement of San Marcos staff, students, or parents. Rather, it appears to be heavily influenced, if not run solely by the superintendent. I call your attention to the March 11th through 13th section where I quote, "Superintendent interviews candidates, selects finalists," end quote. This timeline appears to disregard the recommendations of Leadership Associates, the search firm selected by the district and superintendent. Specifically, in the Leadership Associates contract narrative, it says, "Leadership Associates will handle the collection of applications, screen candidates, and perform background checks. Dr. Van Leuven will work with Superintendent Matsuoka, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Ms. Shaw Carey, and Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. John Becchio, to select 4 finalists to interview." It goes on to say, the interview panel will include Executive Cabinet, SMHS staff, SMHS students, and SMHS parents, with teachers comprising the largest stakeholder group. Our interview protocol supports the inclusion of many stakeholders, and we anticipate having 25 to 30 people involved. Rather than include that panel, the timeline says that the superintendent himself will interview candidates and select finalists and makes no mention of SMHS staff. As presented, the timeline appears to once again disregard the San Marcos High School community. If I've misinterpreted the presented timeline that defines the process to find our next principal, I strongly and respectfully request that it is rewritten to clarify and include San Marcos High School staff, students, and parents that are selected not by the superintendent, but by Assistant Superintendent Becchio. Without this, the district is sending a message to the entire Santa Barbara community that it does not respect the students, parents, and voters it serves. Thank you again for the opportunity to share my perspective.
Thank you. Delene Bliss.
Thank you for your time. Welcome, everybody. Let me introduce myself, Delene Bliss. I have a current senior at San Marcos, but that does not incorporate everything that I bring to the table. I had a student at Dos Pueblos. I have 2 students that went to La Colina. I myself is a La Colina alumni and a San Marcos alumni. My mother was on the steering committee as a parent for the current La Colina principal. My background is vast. The mission statement of the Human Resources Department here incorporates hiring the best staff that we can. This incorporates the parents' involvement. I have been at every meeting with the superintendent at San Marcos. I have met with a couple of board members on this issue. I have been conveyed several times that there would be parents involved in this. Best practices, Portland Unified School District involves parents. They have a parent survey when they're hiring principals. Association of California School Administrators, best practices, 3 best practices. Assemble your team, ask the right questions, get students and parents involved. That is the association that is run, a very generic association. The WASC, I have also been on 2 head searches for independent schools here in Santa Barbara. I've served on 2 WASC committees. Never have I not had parents involved in this process. The outline we received recently had nothing about parents. It had community. That is a very generic term. San Marcos parents have got to be involved in this process if the board and the superintendent want the trust of the San Marcos parents. This has got to stop. We need to build trust. We need to build a bridge. Our schools and our students are way too important to have this kind of a relationship we have now. The way to stop this is this search committee. Mike Wong mentions a few of my topics that we need to really focus on bringing staff, teachers, the superintendent, the head of HR, and parents involved in this process. Ask the staff at San Marcos what parents they want involved in this. Don't take the superintendent's advice. Take the staff, the administrators on campus, what parents they feel could give the best feedback, the best questions to hire this principal. We need good leadership at that school. My son is complaining about the lack and the barriers that are up right now with administration. Was not there last year. So please take our advice and put parents on this council. Thank you.
And Marcy Wimbish.
Hi, my name is Marcy Wimbish, and I'm a parent at San Marcos High School. Last spring at a parent meeting, I asked Mr. Matsuoka how he was going to gain the trust of the San Marcos community. His response was, "I am going to find you a great new principal." With all due respect, this has not yet happened. When I saw the timeline and process outlined for the next attempt at finding San Marcos a new principal, hidden under an ambiguous agenda item, I felt even more hopeless. Let me start by saying a few things. In 6 months, I will no longer be a parent in Santa Barbara Unified School District. You can hold your applause. I've got no personal skin in this game. I am here because I saw the rise in San Marcos High School over the last years, and I have been witness to the tumble that has occurred in the last year. By district and school board measures, you may think that our school is fine, but I am here to tell you that we are not fine. We are lacking leadership, and that hurts. Volunteerism, school spirit, student and staff satisfaction, and a host of other things. Rather than speak about my personal feelings about the things wrong with the process being proposed tonight, I'd like to suggest some solutions based on both on my very intimate knowledge of the San Marcos community and also my knowledge of the interim principal search process last year. So here are my suggestions. 1, consider a different search firm. The one that is being proposed did not yield very good results last year. 2, San Marcos parents, staff, and students should have input prior to the search to provide feedback regarding the qualities that they would like to see in their leader. 3, San Marcos parents and staff should be involved in the entire process until the very end, including choosing and interviewing finalists. 4, the parents and staff who are chosen to be part of this process should be different than the ones who participated in the interim process and should be chosen by someone who is neutral. The chosen group should truly represent all communities at San Marcos. 5, the parent and staff input aspect of the process should be administered by someone other than Mr. Matsuoka. With all due respect, our parents are not in a position right now to trust Mr. Matsuoka, and many San Marcos staff still feel retribution if they challenge the superintendent. I heard about it and then saw it firsthand during the interim search. I believe that Mr. Becchio, the head of Human Resources, would be a good option to coordinate the parent-staff aspect of this process. The parents at San Marcos High School care deeply about our school. Several of us are here this evening because we want to actively participate in its long-term success. We are a large and diverse group of caring and thoughtful parents who want what's best for our school and, in turn, our community. Involving a wide array of San Marcos High School staff, students, and parents throughout the process will help our school recover from the events of the last year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, do you have any comments? And then we'll open up for discussion.
Yes, I can comment about some of the questions and concerns that the parents have raised. And the outline of the contract, I mean, it's a high-level overview. Let me fill in some of the gaps. So as far as opportunities for input, so there will be parent input. There's an evening set aside. We're tentatively scheduling January 15th as that evening opportunity. That week, there will be an online survey run by Leadership Associates where they will ask a series of questions, a lot to the question about qualities and characteristics that the community desires in their next principal. Now, part of what leadership will do with that is they will build a profile of this next principal, which I think is going to be really good feedback for all the stakeholders to see. Here's what I think there's going to be a lot of community input about this, and leadership will aggregate that and produce a summary. There will be staff input. We're going to present this overview and timeline at a staff meeting right when we get back in January. And then Ms. Carey and I plan to spend a whole day on campus so that people can come speak to us during their prep periods. I think in that setting where you have maybe 15 to 20 people is better than the whole staff. We'll gather students to gather input about, students, what would you like to see in your next principal? As far as the selection of the candidates, so Leadership Associates, we are hiring them as a search firm because their net is much broader than just our local Santa Barbara area. They have a network throughout the state. The profile of Dr. Van Leuven He is known statewide. And so his ability to network and find candidates for us is going to be much greater than us just posting it on our local hiring tools. As far as the selection of the people to interview, that is a team effort. It is usually held at the cabinet level. And in response to some of the concerns raised tonight, I view it as one of my major responsibilities to find the leadership of our schools. And that I will fill that role. Now, Ms. Carey will also paper screen with me, and I'll have Dr. Becchio involved. And I can appreciate Dr. Becchio being new to the entire scene, and he brings us a fresh set of eyes. Looking for, I think as far as the interview process, I outlined it lightly in the overview. So we have used an interview process in our district now for leaders for a couple years. I think it's a very thorough and rigorous process. We have had as many as 30 stakeholders involved, which is not a normal interview. I mean, a lot of interview panels, you really have to limit it to about 10 to 12 people. Otherwise, it's just too many people. We use a performance-based experience where 4 candidates come in and they all meet each other. They go through a rotational model, and then they all finish together. I have found it to be very effective to examine things like interpersonal qualities, conflict resolution skills, emotional intelligence, as well as the knowledge and background we need in a high school principal. So I'll pause there. I'm sure the board has comments or questions, and I'll turn it back to the board.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, Mr. Metzoga, if you can address one of the questions, because it was my first question as well. There is a discrepancy in the documents. The time frame put forward by the consultant does not match your narrative. And I do think we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to find an excellent principal for this school that has gone through a lot of disruption. And we also have an opportunity in the process to restore some trust. And so I think that the most robust process that involves as many people as possible, teachers, staff, parents for sure, needs to be involved. And so that discrepancy and that lack of clarity around who would actually be doing the interview is troublesome and makes it hard for me to understand what I'm actually voting on without that clarified. Thanks.
So you're referring to the composition of the interview panel?
Yeah, so in your description, as Mr. Wong read, it outlines that the interview panel, as you've done in other interview situations, is made up of teachers, parents, students, et cetera. But in the consultant's time frame, which was more of a graph, I don't know if you can pull it up.
Brian, can you pull up the timeline?
It says that the interview would just be conducted by the superintendent.
Yes, and so that was a statement that was in the original document. Ms. Capps pointed that out to me, and so I didn't even check with the consultant. That was actually an error in that statement. So the interview process will not be just me. It will be a panel of about 30 people.
And thank you. I regret that. I think because that was put out on Friday, it has added to a lot of confusion at best, and added again potentially to the mistrust of how we're going to conduct this process. And I can just speak for myself. This is one of, if not the most important thing we're going to be doing this year. I know we need to get this right. I know your school has been through a ton, our school, and so this is just a very unfortunate error because it's not the way we want to get out of the gate. So I'm glad you fixed it because again, I noticed it yesterday as I was preparing for this, and it was an alarm for me. And I, again, just regret that the message sort of went out that parents would not be involved in the interview process when, in fact, that is not the case.
Ms. Ford?
Well, I have to say that I completely agree with Ms. Capps because, for the last 6 months or so, it's been a pretty intense campaign and election process. And what was clear was that parents and teachers and really this community wants a greater level of accountability and transparency. And the process that came out that was publicly shared with everyone didn't indicate that kind of transparency. And as you can see, has created some continued mistrust. And I also am concerned that we're being asked to approve a process on the same time, in the same meeting, when we are seeing it for the first time. So the concern I have is that we have some sort of discipline around an introduction to an issue or a process, give some feedback, and then perhaps vote on it at a later date when things have been modified, because I think a few things need to be modified. First of all, I hope that you're describing something like a community forum, Mr. Matsuoka, because I understand that you may have done something like this last spring, but you have a whole new 9th grade, and the 12th grade is now gone. So if every parent had an opportunity to talk to the consultant and or you, I think it would really add to the trust factor. I also think that the line about anything that is designated only by you should be removed entirely, and it should, for me, and it's worked for me always at my schools, is that the school should decide what staff is involved in the interview process, and the parents should decide what parents are involved in. There are all kinds of processes to do that, but I think it's really important. I think it's a crunched timeline also. It may be unrealistic, and so I want to just call that out. To be able to have candidates by, I think it said something like January 15th, or at least to, what does it say?
February 14th.
February 14th deadline for applications, when they're really putting together the description on January 15th. My advice would be to extend it through February. And finally, I too have the concern about leadership associates, just because one of the things I heard as I campaigned was that many parents were really very disappointed with the fact that they were presented with one candidate, and that doesn't really seem like much of a choice. And so I'd love for you to address why you think now they could come up with more that would be exemplary and great for the school.
Additional comments?
Did you want to respond
Reed?
to it?
So let me respond to the last question. So a process was begun to try to find the next principal last spring. The initial parent community meeting, it was just a difficult meeting, me with them. And it's on Facebook, so everybody can see it. And also the staff, we asked the question, are they ready for a permanent principal, or perhaps would an interim serve just as a useful sort of breather year? By the time we identified the goal of finding an interim principal, it was about April. Candidates were very few. We actually ran the position. We didn't have a lot of applicants last spring because it was a difficult situation. So I asked leadership to find us an interim. They actually presented multiple candidates to me. I screened them. I actually met with two others. Dr. Ruenhag emerged as a good candidate, and he's filling the role. But we all understood, especially him, that he knows it's a one-year assignment. So going out earlier, and there is a question about, can you go out too early? You can also go out too late. I think it's early, it's not too early. I worry about going out too late because candidates are looking for their jobs, for promotions, for different transfers, probably in the January, February, March window.
Dr. Reed?
Thank you. So first of all, I just want to say that I appreciate both my fellow board members' comments in terms of transparency. But I guess my question would be, this process that is lined up here does not really show the transparency of parent involvement. Like you shared about parent input by January 15th and staff and students. And I guess I would be more comfortable knowing where indeed does that fit in the process. So more transparency in when is all this happening, when are these conversations happening, and then specifying that these conversations are actually happening. Because I do think one of the things that was really important that was in the spring process was involving parents and involving the staff and involving the students. And one of the things that, as a board member, we went out to the schools and really wanted student voice. We wanted to hear student voice and understand what they're wanting. And they were at the forums. They wanted these forums to take place because they wanted their input. So I think all of those pieces, parent, staff, student, is vital in this conversation. I think ultimately the decision lies in the superintendent and the HR, Dr. Becchio and Ms. Carey. Those are the three designees. I think we have provided with our past evaluation that we trust that your judgment and your knowledge in these areas is well-founded, or else we wouldn't have made the decisions that we did. But I would wish for perhaps maybe a new timeline. I think your comment about having something in advance of a meeting to make a decision on would be a very smart thing, so that perhaps what I might throw back is I'd like to see this revised to inform us as to the additional opportunities for parent involvement, staff, student involvement, and sort of maybe more detailed processes that are going to be taking place, so that I would feel that we were really looking to ensure that we're getting the feedback of everybody involved, and really to gain the trust. It is important that we gain the trust, and it is important that we also trust in the leadership that we have currently. So I would like to see how we can bring this together.
Yeah, that's actually my suggestion, and thanks for teeing it up. I don't share concerns about leadership associates necessarily, just in part because I want to move forward with the contract so that the work can get going. But I would only want to do that if this time frame can be revised and much more specific and made public. So that we can have this opportunity again. So if that can happen, that's my suggestion, I would want to move forward so that the search firm can get going like tomorrow. But that this is filled out with much more detail and specificity about timeframes, and actually, again, it's just vague, and I think everyone deserves to know exactly what's happening. Another, maybe perhaps more minor, but I want to raise this because of one of the parents who flagged this. With our new president, I think your role is to help with the agenda, and as a communications person, things do sort of seem like they're hidden. I know they're not hidden, but if we can improve the way that items are agendized, so with the public view in mind, so that if you're a parent and you're curious about the San Marcos principal search, it jumps out at you, and this doesn't. So if we can it's been something that's kind of on my mind since I've been on the board, but with this opportunity of a new president, if that could be my gentle suggestion, that we don't sort of get sucked into this bureaucratic language that's very obtuse. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Ford.
So I totally agree, and I'm wondering if it's possible that in order to move ahead with this really important priority for the district and the board, that we could approve the contract but not the process. I think it was sort of added on, and it's right there in the agenda item, but instead request that the more robust, clear, detailed, and reflective of our concerns process be presented to us in January.
So I'd just like to thank and respect all the comments made on the dais, and I just want to comment in terms, this has been a very difficult year, and we're still making steps toward making things better, and we know each day builds trust each day in terms of that as we begin to openly talk about the process, how it's making us feel. I don't need to repeat what has been said here. I'm in agreement with moving it forward. We've got to move forward on it. We've got to start making this an important issue where you start to build that trust of the fact that we're doing stuff, and we're gonna have to go back and forth on that. We're gonna have to trust that some days are gonna be good, some things are gonna be bad. But we've got to move forward on this. And I appreciate all the comments in terms of this, and we have to make that step. I agree with approving the contract itself, but making a much more detailed process so that we know for sure what we're doing, that, again, that we understand the process in which we are approving today. So I think we have to move forward. Mr. Matsuk, I think you've got some direction and comments from the board that I think we need to include, that you need to come back with us in terms of that process. But I think it's also important that we really do keep in mind the feelings that are so deep about this. And I tell you, it was a really tough year to be on this board, to sit and have to be accountable to you as we should be in terms of the public who have put us here and appointed us. We do take it seriously. There are times that there are going to be decisions that we don't all necessarily agree on, but if the center of what we do is our students, then that's always where we can always come back to the commonality in with regards to how we move forward. And I do think that we can certainly move forward, and it will make us stronger on the other side, and it will build that trust. And we don't expect that trust is going to come back today, but over time, I do believe that it will. We just have to give each other a break with regards to that.
So let me summarize what I'm hearing tonight. I appreciate moving the contract forward because recruiting is everything. So we'll have leadership associates post the position. We're also going to post it on our HR channels. I heard the request for detail, all right, and specificity. So we will build that out. We'll bring that back on January 15th, and then the board will have a chance to review that, ask questions, and I'm sure our community will have some input as well.
And a couple more comments. How far in advance, because I did hear in terms of our advance to get that information before we come to the board. I don't know in terms of timing for you to get that information to us.
I will build out the detail before we go into our vacation, and I'll send that out to you. Because some of the meeting dates are set for, we've got the parent input meeting scheduled for January 15th. Now, to the question, are we squaring this up with the site admin? I mean, the master schedule of San Marcos High School, it's busy. And so we're trying to find evenings where there isn't another schedule conflict. It is the evening of a school board meeting, but we looked at all the other possible arrangements, and we just figured out that's the best possible compromise. I will get that out to you before the break. I can get it out to you. I'll try to get it out to you in this week's Friday letter, just so that you have a chance. You can give me feedback, because by the time we get to January 15th, that board meeting, some of this will be in motion. Now, if the board wants to slow it down, we can slow it down. I mean, we can stretch these timelines out. It's just, then we start running the risk of missing some of the hiring windows, okay? So we'll get you the details as soon as I can, and then we'll give the board a chance to comment January 15th.
Appreciate that. Go
If
ahead.
I could just clarify, I'm not looking for it to slow down, and so if we can have more, have this built out but not wait, so moving forward with January 15th and all that, I think that's the consensus that I'm hearing as well. And I would love to know too how, if this is coming back on the agenda, that means it'll be put forward the Friday before, but can anything be communicated to parents? Or I just would put this forward if any kind of process, when we get it, if it can also be shared with the parents, that would be my recommendation as well.
Yeah, it actually was my intent to get, after the board heard this and voted, then I was going to send out communication to the staff and to the parents about the timeline and the process. I've heard the request for specificity. I will add that to both communications. And that will go out to both audiences at San Marcos High School before the break.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you also. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Finish your comment, Ms. Ford.
I'm so used to sitting over there. So I was just going to say thank you, Mr. Matsuoka, and also the clarity and framing so that we can get an understanding of the details. And I also agree with the moving forward of the contract as quickly as possible, because I understand we really need to stay timely in that process.
Ms. Ford.
Just one more question about the, are you willing to delete the part designated by the superintendent? So that the choice of the staff or members of the community panel are chosen
Brian, go back
internally?
Up. So I think I can answer your question. You know, some of the language in here is leadership associate centric. I'm watching people's eyes. So it's written from the perspective of the consultant leadership associates. I talked to Dr. Van Leuven today. I said, your role is to find us candidates and to do some of the research about it, but as far as everything else, we as a school district are going to run and own that process. And as far as, who decides about who sits on the panel, I think that's a really important question. I hear the concerns from the parents here. And it's got to be parents from all different perspectives of the school, and even some who are not happy with me. All right, I respect that. But I'm also asking people, are you ready to look at the needs of the school in a balanced view? Okay, so I think the selection of parents, I think that's an important process, in terms of deciding who, and certainly the staff. And so, we've turned to the site admin, but, there's staff leaders that we've gotten to know, and then we'll think about what community members are involved.
Does that answer your question?
I don't think that answers my question.
She's asking.
Respectfully.
Okay.
So the question is, are you saying that you want a process where you're the one who determines who's on the interview panel, not the school itself?
I have viewed the selection of the interview panel as more of a cabinet and superintendent responsibility in consultation with the staff and the school. If you're asking for that to tip more towards the school, I'd like to hear from the entire board.
Yes, Ms. Munoz, thank you. Yes.
I think that communication and transparency is, very important to me as a new board member, and finding out, and deciding how it's going to happen and be more inclusive of all the parents. And then also, respecting the leadership with our school district is important to me. Therefore, for myself, I think, as we've discussed, like communication, have it in writing in advance to the parents, I'm certainly in favor of that.
I think I'm a little confused. Where is that line that you're referring to, Ms. Ford, with regards where it's saying only the superintendent? Did I miss it?
January 15th.
January 15th.
Consultant meets with staff and community designated by superintendent. And then, I was only reinforcing this idea that calling out who is actually on these committees is part of the increased detail in the process for me. And I in the past, what I've done, which has worked beautifully, is I've had forums like you have planned, and then open it up to parents to just say who would like to be a part of this process. And then if you have more than the number of parents that you've sort of allocated for that group, then it's strictly a lottery, and everyone feels it's fair, and it isn't something that has been sort of like favorites are picked or certain people are picked, et cetera. And I think that, I guess I would just say the people I talk to are concerned that there are favorites and there are people who are not favorites, and that somehow that could be reflected in this still somewhat mistrustful environment. That's my feeling.
Additional comments?
So I understand, are you, in your experience, so you're requesting that sort of process of like, hey, who wants to be on the committee, come from the interim principal?
Oh, sure.
Rather than from rather than from cabinet. To me, I think the question is, if it's phrased like that, I'm less concerned about who's actually communicating that. But if you're speaking from your experience that that's more powerful, and also given the fact that we do have an interim principal, is that the right way to go? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think John Becchio could do it. Anybody could do it as long as they just harness the interest in a more general way.
Sure.
And that it's not like I get to pick who's on that committee. There's always, because when you do that, you always open yourself up to criticism. And I think that what we're saying here is, this would be great if this process is not open to criticism, the process itself.
Right. I agree.
So, Ms. Sachs, so is this something that, with regards to the comments, is something that you can consider in terms of taking a step out of that piece and again, that next step toward creating much more trust and transparency?
Yeah, I like the word you mentioned is lottery, because it means that it's an unbiased process about who it represents that group. I mean, ballpark, I think we could have about 5 to 6 parents on this. Now, I think we should have parents from all different cross-sections of the school. So I think what you're saying process-wise is, all right, let's identify the stakeholder parent groups, who's interested, and from those groups, we do a lottery out of each group. Like Royal Pride comes to mind. The ELAC, DLAC community. I think there's some specific parent groups we could identify who's interested, but then the final decision is by lottery. Yeah, I could support that.
And sometimes what I would do is just leave it open so that like maybe 5 or 6 were through the lottery process, but maybe leave the staff have the the possibility of adding 2 more of their own choice so that they make sure that all the groups are represented, or that, for example, a specific parent or interest is represented. But anyway, I just don't want to belabor the point, only to say that I think there are other ways to do it rather than you picking only.
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to move on from that, but you've got the direction in terms of that, and take into consideration particularly about where we're on this item on 15th, making sure that all folks, and it's not just you, so that it's not just pointing at you. So, do I have a motion to approve this item?
Yeah, I move to approve the contract with Leadership Associates for the recruitment and hiring of the next principal at San Marcos High School.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion approves. Thank you. Thank you for that great discussion, open discussion, and transparent discussion. So we move on to action agenda item number 7. Thank you. Approval of the use of the site funding for Library Quad Improvement Project Phase 1 at San Marcos High School. Mr. Vizzolini.
Good evening, Board. This is a quick little action item, but I wanted to present it. We have a couple of new board members. So the Royal Pride Foundation at San Marcos High School has requested permission to use some site funding to do an improvement of their library quad area. The idea is that it's currently a grassed-in area with some tables on it that students like to use, but it's not ADA compliant, and it's not too beautiful, right? It's a grass area. It doesn't get watered enough. So I put a little slide deck together. So for perspective, the project location is in the library quad, which is surrounded by the Greek theater, the office, the library, and the academic wings. This is what it looks like right now. So the idea is to remove this stuff. Some of the trees would stay. And this is a very popular space for students during the lunch period. And it's also now a place where, if improved, the library could use it as an outdoor teaching area. So there could be a multi-function there. So here's the design is by Earthform Designs. So they are a landscape architect in town, and they've done several projects at San Marcos High School. They did the landscaping for the B-Wing. They did the landscaping around the gym, and they did the landscaping around the Greek theater. So they've had quite a bit of experience, and we're pretty happy with their work. And so this shows the improved area from the top. The round circles are new tables that could receive umbrellas. You can see the blue rectangles. They're actually benches that are around the perimeter. And the red are the pavers, and they are using those as a fundraiser, so they will actually have donors' names on them. This is a second view that shows some additional shade trees that are going in that same area. So they would like to use Royal Pride Foundation money to do this, and if approved, we'll grant a contract that the school district will administer, and we'll have an inspector that's on site currently looking at the ADA bathroom project, make sure that this goes in per plan. So I would like to put that up for questions, and if approved, we'll get it built.
Any questions or comments on this item? I did have one question, Mr. Bizzolini. On the quote, I noticed that the bid did not include purchase of materials and benches and bricks.
That's correct.
I first want to thank the Royal Pride Foundation for coming forth and funding this project, but I just want to know where that funding would be coming from to do those materials.
Right, so the Royal Pride Foundation is doing two things. They're doing the purchase. They are allowed by law to purchase materials without going to the district to administer the contract. So they have the pavers already on site. So they've purchased those, and the benches are going to be, they are actually going to be purchased by us. So typically in a situation like this where we have a fundraising effort, the district pitches in and helps with the soft costs for the landscape architect, for the inspectors, any testing, things like that. Royal Pride reached out and got this done ahead of time. So we didn't have the opportunity to spend our money on that, so I offered to change and buy benches for them. So we'll help them purchase and install those benches after the pavers are done. The benches are actually installed as an in-ground unit, and they're outside of the pavers. So it'll be in the landscaped area around it.
Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge it looks amazing, and to thank the Royal Pride Foundation for supporting this.
Do I hear a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
So one moment. Did you have something, Ms. Williams?
No.
Okay. First, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Moving to item number 8, positive certification, first interim financial report for fiscal year 2018 and 19. Ms. Jite.
Thank you, board members, and welcome our new board members. So I'm sure you've read through the narrative, so I'm going to kind of go over the, not talk about the executive summary. You can, I'm sure you've already read that. So I'd like to spend some time on the unrestricted side of the budget tonight. A lot of times we kind of look at the budget as a whole, but we like to call that operating budget our unrestricted side of the budget. And basically, on the unrestricted side of the budget is 90% of what we do. Most of our staff is paid out of this. Our largest chunks of revenue come into this side of the budget. And so I think we need to spend some quality time on the unrestricted side, or the operating budget. So what we have here tonight is the difference between the adopted budget and the first interim. And with the first interim, you have a lot of changes, because at the adopted budget, you start it about early May, you finish about the first board meeting of June, you go to press, and then it's done. The state of California doesn't pass its budget until the 15th, if they do it. They have been doing it lately. The federal budget is not even approved until September. And so we don't know a lot of information. We don't know how we're going to end the year for 17-18 or the prior year, because not all invoices are in May, and not all the expenses are accounted for. Some revenues come in at the end. So there's a lot of unknowns. So it's probably one of the, called it several different things, but I'll say the weakest budget is the adopted budget, because there's so many unknowns and there's so many assumptions that we make in the adopted. So then we get to first interim, and it's as of October 31st. So we have some data. We have a couple months of payroll for certificated. We have classified 12-month employees that we can really look into. And we have our open enrollment that happens in August and September. So we start to get a lot more information. We also have our federal funds known more at that time also. But on the restricted side, we have our main funding source is what they call LCFF, which we are, at this time, we are very close to basic aid. So last year, in 17-18, we were designated as basic aid because we had a lot of one-time property taxes come to us, which we do not have this year. One was a sale of property with RDA, and then we got an influx of prior year property taxes from the county auditor treasurer's office that released them because of their financial system that they use. They had some issues with. So we got a big influx of property taxes. So in 17-18, that put us into basic aid. So the state of California, in April, our P2 timeline, they look at us and say, oh, Santa Barbara's basic aid now, or community funded. And I'll use those terms interchangeably because they used to say basic aid, now they're saying community funded. So anyway, but we know more now. We know our property taxes, we know our enrollment, we have projections for ADA, so we have more information. And right now, we're saying that 18-19, we will be very close to basic aid, and if something changes in the property taxes, we could be in basic aid. But we also lose some supplemental property taxes because the state of California is saying we're basic aid, so the county auditor treasurer says we basic aid, so we don't get those property taxes, even though we know we're not. So there was a slight change from adopted budget to first interim on the LCFF, and it's only $126,000. And this was due to property taxes did come in higher. We always budget about a 3% growth in property taxes. We had a 4.97%, so it went up about 1.97%. But we also have this interchanging EPA money that we get, and it's kind of a hard concept, but if you're fully into community funded, you get it all. If you're way into LCFF, you get it all. But if you're teetering on that line, that EPA money, they reduce it because they're not going to give you that EPA money to put you into basic aid. So even
Mr. Tate, can you explain what EPA money is?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the Education Protection Act. So when our property taxes went up, our EPA went down. So that's why you don't see a huge increase right there. So if you think about it, almost a 1% in property taxes is about $1 million. So you would think, well, we got more property taxes. Why didn't it go up? Well, the EPA went down because it didn't get us into basic aid, but so it lowered our EPA. And it's kind of hard to imagine, but trust me, that's how it works, and it's ridiculous, but that's how it works. So our enrollment, we're doing, federal funding, federal revenue. We do get some, you're on the restricted side of the budget. Can you go to unrestricted side of the budget? That's what we're talking about.
You moved to restricted?
No, I just said a little bit. Let's stay here for a while. So the federal revenue that we've received right now is $70,000, almost $71,000. That's MA funding. We don't budget for that until we receive it because it's 18 to 20 months out, and we never know if we're going to get it and when we're going to get it. State revenue went up slightly, and that was due to some mandate funding that we have one-time mandated money that when we went to press on the adopted budget, it came in higher in the state allocation, so that was one increase. That's one of the reasons why it increased. Local revenue. Sorry, I have to wear old glasses because mine are getting repaired. This increase is due to tuition received from foreign students and a refunds on some California state teachers' retirements and various insurance reimbursements. So those types of things we can't project. We don't anticipate them in an adopted budget. So that's the influx there.
Can I ask you a question on that, Mr. Tate? So I get that you know what you know at the time of the adopted budget, and there's things that are happening along the way. Is it possible to give us updates more closer to when they happen as opposed to now? Because it looks like there's huge jumps between the adopted. I mean, I'm just asking. I know it's another ask in terms of staffing, because did it just like this 70 million 70, is that
70,000.
70,000. So that just kind of came in. It just feels like it's a lot's happening between the time we adopt the budget and by the time we hear the first interim. So is there a way to have an in-between report to the board?
Sure.
Okay. Just so that we can connect it a little bit.
But let's consider what's material. Do you think, and I'm just asking this to determine what is material. Is it 70,000 on a $135 million material? Is that material?
I guess I'm not necessarily saying on the amount, but just, you know, just in terms of we got additional revenue, federal revenue. We may not necessarily know the amount, but what's kind of coming in that we didn't anticipate when we adopted, because there's so much happening, a lot happening, certainly not in your control, but just to have a little bit better context of when we see this, we understand, oh, that kind of came in between that time, and you're seeing the number here. It's fine.
Okay, sure. Okay, so on the
I'm sorry, Mr. Dr. Reed.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Ms. Sims-Moten in that even if it's before it happens, to giving us the context of what possibly could fluctuate, you know, that these different things could play during this interim period. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it's an actual amount, but like just now, this has really been helpful to me to hear that we didn't really know about this. It was kind of teetering, you know, this language, but now I have a sense of, oh, there's other players in this, and when are they going to actually come to fruition within this time frame? So that I think that's more or less what Ms. Sims-Moten is saying too.
Okay.
Yeah, just more updates, and I get it, because doing the budget. But I think it's clearly setting that out from the beginning, and then we can anticipate it, and it makes sense, and it has a better context when you're presenting it now. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so on certificated salaries, I know you may remember when you asked, you may have asked that if you look at the actual SACS document, this is how it represents itself in the changes. The increases are in brackets, and the decreases are not in brackets. And a couple budgets ago, you asked us to mirror that. So we did mirror that, and I just want to confirm that you're still liking this format, because it is not intuitive to look at something in a bracket and say it went up. Okay? So if you like it, we will continue to do this. If not, we will reverse it out.
I like it, but then I do budgets all the time, but Ms. Ford, you're coming.
I don't like it. I don't think it's intuitive, and so not only perhaps board members, but members of the community, and you know, in most places, that's a negative number, not a positive number. So I would prefer if we went to something that most people recognize.
And that would be, just so that kind of give a clearer direction, I think when we first started to look at this, it made more sense in terms of that, but it's certainly open to make sure that as we're reviewing it and we get a little bit more understanding of it, it needs to be more intuitive in terms of that. So what would that look like, Ms. Ford?
It would look like
the opposite.
The opposite.
So, yeah.
Between those first two numbers,
Mhm.
the bracketed, the parentheses would be around the first number,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be negative, and then the second number would not have parentheses. Classified would not.
I agree. I think it's not intuitive to see it backwards like this. So we if everyone agrees, that's not a problem to change that. That's just formatting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so why did we have a decrease in certificated staff? We had 3 vacant positions in the certificated staff, and that was, we had one person, we relieved 2 kindergarten teachers because we dropped 2 kindergarten classes, one at Monroe and one at McKinley, and then OAS. We had one less employee from OAS. Classified salaries went up. We took over a locksmith and a carpenter from the bond funds because those people were done with their locksmith and carpentry, that the carpenter went along with the locksmith. So they ended up finishing everything they needed to do in bond fund, but we still need a locksmith and a carpenter. So we moved those into routine restricted maintenance, RR&M, which we have to have 3% of the total general fund budget in there because we have received state funds, and so that's to keep our facilities in good repair. We also had curriculum specialists, and most of the curriculum specialists that were added are in site funds, because remember, the sites get their funds on both sides of the budget also, unrestricted and restricted. We also had a bilingual aide. We added a bilingual aide, and that person was in, we didn't know if we were going to hire a contracted service or we were going to hire someone in salaries. And so we had it budgeted in contracted services so that when we hired the person, we moved them into classified salaries. Okay, we also had custodian mentors. We increased them. We have like head custodian mentor type people now to train our custodians. So we're moving into employee benefits. So if your employee benefits go up, if your salaries go up, your employee benefits go up. But we also had an interesting thing happen with our health and welfare benefits. Since the Affordable Care Act stopped having their supplemental. So if you're an employee and you choose not to be on our health insurance, you can get a supplement from the federal government, and you take that and you go and purchase your own health insurance. Well, they stopped that. And we didn't know that happened until we were working on the budget and saw such an increase. And it's about $500,000 worth of an increase. And so in researching that, that's one of the reasons why that's one of the reasons why it went up. But another reason is, of course, we have an automatic 1%, but that was already in the budget it adopted. But we had, by law, we were required for our noon duties to become permanent employees and not hourlies. So then if they were 6-hour employees, they were entitled to health insurance. So most of the health insurance increase is due to either increase of staff eligible for health insurance and the increase in the staff being inside this budget, the new budget, and the statutories go along with it. Our books and supplies, if we get more money, for example, the mandated money, and we give it to the sites, or to departments, they do project to spend it. So anytime we get more money, everyone projects to spend it. We have some carryover from the prior year in here also, which we did not know how much carryover we would have at adopted budget. Same goes with services and operations. We did have some transportation increase, our buses. We do not have our own buses, so we contract out, and it's an expensive part of our budget, and it goes up by CPI every year and by the cost of gas. So we usually find out what CPI is in August of the current year. We also had a utility increase, so that was that went up. I believe it went up about 2%. I'm looking to Lacey, my fiscal director, and so that's the increase for contracted services and operations. We also spent about $1 million. We added another $1 million to our savings account to Fund 17. It adopted. We had $1 million projected. We went to $2 million projected, and we've actually moved that money over into Fund 17 back in November. So if you come over to page 6, right there, we projected our ending fund balance was going to be $66 million. We thought we were going to deficit about 11, and it ended up that we had $22 million in reserve, and we are now projecting to have a $12.7 million deficit. And so that's a $2 million increase to our deficit. Well, $1 million of that was to go to Fund Fund 17, our savings account. So we've increased our deficit by $1 million. We usually, as you've seen in the past, we usually do end our year better than what we're projecting. But at this point, this is how we're projecting the year to end. Any money that anybody has is planned to spend it. And we know that just doesn't happen, but we don't know for sure. I'll pause there. Any questions? So this side of the budget.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I need to go back in terms of looking at this. Either I misunderstood you with regards to the unrestricted expenditures. So the first line, because we're talking about expenditures, so we adopted 58.7 and we only spent 58, so that would be a positive change, right? And then, so the next line said that we adopted 18, and the first time we increased it by that, so it would be a negative. So, did I misunderstand what you said?
No, you can really look at this in both ways. I'm just trying to figure out which way works best for the board.
But to Ms. Ford's point, I think it is reflecting, the parentheses are showing negative because this is the expenditure side of the budget. So I just want to make sure I'm not reading it wrong.
Well, when people see when people see brackets, they think it's like a decrease, I think. And so this is not a decrease because we projected salaries were going to be 18.5 and they're not, they're 19.5, they went up.
Right, so I guess what I was, and maybe I don't want to take up a lot of time, I'm just trying to say that we spent more by the time we had the first interim, so we're in a negative piece. That's all I'm trying to understand.
I see what you're saying, but as I said, that some people don't look at it that way. I'll do it any way you want, because we know, we as budgeters know what's going on. I just want to make it really clear for you all.
Or we could just indicate that the parentheses.
I thought about doing the change would be positive, we'll try to work
Okay,
something.
I didn't mean to, but I
That's
just thought I misinterpreted what the request was.
Yeah, the challenge to understand, there's a change in the data, but then there's a change of impact to the district budget. And that's what gets confusing. So, certificated salaries, that was a good change. So that's why we listed the change as a positive number. All the others with the parentheses means it's impacting our budget negatively. So it's just a challenge with accounting.
And that's what, the reason why we did it is because the SACS form does it that way. And I remember having this conversation with you all, and you said it should match because,
And the SACS system, we don't have control over that. That's a county software system. Or state, so, yeah. Let me ask a clarification from Ms. Jate, just sort of for our education. So, top of page 6, that result of operations, see the negative $2 million? Okay, so that, from an accounting standpoint, that's not good. But here's what's also indicated in another spot. So we transferred $2 million for this fiscal year into our savings account. Correct? So
Yes.
it's essentially, there's a way to defend the negative $2 million. We put $2 million into savings. So is it true that our net this year we're even?
no,
Oh.
because, sorry.
Darn, I was hoping
So, no, because we had 1 million in the 10.7. We had projected to, in an adopted budget, we projected to put away 1 million.
In the 10.
Yes, in the 10. And so then we increased it to 2 in the first interim, which gave us $2 million. So $2 million negative is 1 million of that went to our savings account.
Got it.
Yes, so is there a way is that explained somewhere?
Yeah,
in
it
there?
is.
Okay.
It's coming up.
It's coming up, but
It's
not
coming
yet.
up.
Okay.
Okay, so the graph down there shows that you can see that salaries and benefits, as in every company in the whole wide world, is salaries and benefits. I'm assuming. I haven't looked at everyone in the world, but. Okay, so on the restricted side of the budget, I want you to understand what lives on the restricted side of the budget. So it is just that. It's restricted. So you just saw Mr. Vizzolini tell you that San Marcos Royal Pride Foundation is donating money for that lovely sitting area out in front of their library quad. And that money comes into our system and sits on the restricted side of the budget. We have no access to that money. We can't look at that money and say, at the end of the year, if we didn't spend it, and say, oh, we got, $5 million, let's increase salaries. That's not yours to spend. Now, it's sites to spend, it's departments, it's education to spend, but it's not a big bucket to spend free. Whereas the unrestricted side that's where everything happens, and that's where we can look to see, can we do this, can we do that, above and beyond. Now, on the restricted side of the budget, we would love all of our departments, all of our sites to spend that money first. Because whatever money we get this year for these kids should be spent on these kids. So if we get $2 million in federal revenue in Title I, we should spend it on those kids that earn that money. And all of it. And a lot of times it just doesn't happen. Stuff happens. You want to hire an after-school, tutor or something, and you don't get it for the first 5 weeks of the year or the first 6 months of the year. Then you have that money sitting in there and you're waiting to find somebody to fill that position. So there are a lot of reasons why people don't spend that money. Also, the donation accounts, those all come from, we have a lot of community support with, edible forests and gardens and all kinds of things, and we have no access to that money. So if tomorrow someone said, you will never get restricted side of the budget, again, you will not get any money on that side, we could still be operational. But you can't say it, you can't flip it and say that. Because the operational budget is the budget, not the restricted side. Okay? So, as we went through the increases on the restricted side of the budget, a lot of that is things that happen that, the donation accounts aren't all spent down. They're saving to buy something else. We have federal funds that aren't always spent all the way down. Instructional materials. We have CTIG grant. A lot of these things sometimes also are planned out over multiple years, and the CTIG grant is a really good example of that, and that's the Career Tech grant that we get, and that is like they have a plan for that, and they know how much money they're getting every year, and they plan for multiple years to spend that money. So that's another reason why, and that one will fall to fund balance, and some don't. Some go to deferred revenue, and I'm not going to get into an accounting explanation of this, but that means that it's money that you didn't earn, so it goes back into the next year, into 18-19. So a lot of that happens at the year end. So what happens to this is the federal funds, you see it's $1.1 million. Well, I could tell you in every account where that carryover came in. And most of it, of that 1.1, was the Title I. It's hard to spend. Sites have a really hard time spending that money because it's so restricted. So, and that goes through almost every one of these accounts that are on the restricted side. When you see such a big jump, there was one accounting correction, not a correction, but the SELPA decided they wanted to see the money recorded in it. SELPA is our, what's the acronym? Special Education Local Plan. So they decided that they want their accounting to be done differently. So it went out of other state revenue and into local revenue. So that's why there's such a big jump in other local revenue. And I want to clarify that special ed does live on the restricted side of the budget, so that would be the only one that you could never say it goes away completely, and we have to always keep special ed going. So getting to the expenditures, as your revenues grow, as we move carryover into budget on the restricted side of the budget, into the revenue, then it's opened up to expenditures. So what we do is when we close the books, we reallocate a lot of those funds back out to the sites and into different departments. So they get an influx of money, so they sit there and they spend that money. They revise their budgets and send them in, and then we put them in. So you see a huge increase, an $8 million increase to expenditures, but you see a $6.1 million in revenue increase. So they're not only spending all the money they get in, but they're spending some of their carryover from last year, which was $3.2 million. So the end result of this year is about 1.5 million left in ending fund balance for the restricted side. That's not that bad when usually it's about 500,000 or 600,000 left in donation sides. So we don't project a lot of funds sitting in the restricted side at the end of the year. Now, in the multi-year projections, we always budget zero remaining on the restricted side. So money in, money out. So on page 10, you see that our reserves are decreasing in the unrestricted side of the budget, but our special reserve is growing. That's our savings account. So then the white line is the restricted side of the budget. So you can see on the multi-year projections, we have no restricted funds being spent or having a fund balance. Any questions on that? So here's the components of the unrestricted fund balance, and this is what Ms. Sims-Moten is very interested in, is how we allocate our funds out in the components of ending fund balance. And basically what it is, okay, here's your ending fund balance. How are you going to, where is this money going to lie? And as you can see, we have a small amount in other assigned, and I couldn't really tell you what that is because it's only $2,500, but we do have one-time mandated funds of $2.8 million that we are holding over from years past of one-time funds, and we have staff that says they're projecting to spend that in 1920. So you won't see the revenue go up in 1920, you'll see the fund balance be that, but you will have expenditures of 2.8 in 1920 to eat away those fund balance. And then we have some in lottery that we're holding on to, and then so then the total assigned balance is 4.4, and our economic reserve is 4.8. So the combined of those two is $9.26 million. Plus, we have our Fund 17, which I thought was on this schedule. Oh, it's on the multi-year, okay. So we can go over to the multi-year, which is in on page 14. This is what we call Kerry Matsuoka's multi-year, because he likes to see it combined. So this is combined, both unrestricted and restricted, and in 1819, we just told you the story of what makes up that budget. And you can see on line 17, it says assigned fund balance is 4.464. Well, that's the same number you see on page 11 under the total assigned funds. So I just wanted to show you how that correlates. Now, what's in the multi-year projections? Well, whatever happens one time in this year does not get repeated in 1920 or 2021. Then what we do is we rerun our LCFF calculations for the 2 years out. That's on the calculator that we have. That's a recommended from the state. And as you can see, we're projecting that 1920 and 2021 we will be in community funded. And unfortunately, the state in 1920 will say, no, if we don't go into CF this year, they will look back and say, oh, your your LCFF for 1819, so they're going to fund us, or they're going to give us back our supplemental property taxes that we lost in 1819 and put them in 1920. So that's all figured in our amounts here, and then we do step and column on the salaries. We do our 1% to health. We do our PERS and STIRS increase, which PERS and STIRS is about a 4.58% increase each year. It does slow down by the year 2021. So as you can see, we are planning to deficit spend. Some of that is a planned deficit, some of it is not. So we need to be careful in our decisions that we make throughout the next couple years. And one thing we kind of skipped over the enrollment, but you know, since 15-16, we've gone down 836 kids. So, but if you divide that by 18 sites, that doesn't give you many kids at each site. And then you divide by grade, you're down to nothing in each grade, practically. So it's not like we haven't declined enough that we can start letting reductions in staff. What is happening, though, is, if you think about it, that some class sizes are getting smaller. And is that a positive? Some people say yes, some people say no. I'll leave that to the experts. I'm just here to report the money. And but one thing that I want you to understand is that when we are given an entitlement, and we figure the entitlement on our ADA and our base grants by grade span, right? You've all seen that K3 is a certain amount, 4-6 is a certain amount. It gets higher as the grades get, as the older grade spans. So if 15-16 we're way up here with ADA, and our entitlement and revenue is up here, and our property taxes are here, we're LCFF, and as we go smaller and smaller, we reduce our ADA, we're almost kind of deficiting ourselves into basic aid, right? Because our entitlement gets less because our kids are gone, but our property taxes is rising, and that's how we're getting into basic aid. Now, what could change? Well, our governor could come in and say, I want to put $11,000 on every grade span, or make it $11,000. So it's around 7, high school's like 9. So that could wipe us out of basic aid right away. But money's money. We don't care where it comes from, right? So we'll take that, 11,000. That would be nice. I lost my train of thought on that. Sorry. So anyway, we don't know what he will do. We don't know if he's going to give one-time funds. You know, every conference I've gone to, the housing market looks good. They talk about a mini baby quick recession, year or two, not anything big like 2008 through 2012. So things look good in the future. I think the district will end up better than our budget. We always do. But I think we do have a deficit problem because of our revenues, and our salaries grow, and we are not declining at such a huge rate that it warrants letting a lot of our salaries and benefits to get them to decline, reduce staffing. So we are projecting that we are still declining, and in a couple more years we'll be down by about 1,000 since 15-16. But I want to end on a happy note. So, not that that's not happy, but, we have an actuarial study. We brought you a report a couple months ago, I think, that showed that our actuarial went down from 16 million down to 10. We now have to do, we always have had to do a report on that, a major look back every 2 years, and now they do an interim every year. So in the back page 16, I took the $10 million that we owed. We had some interest, And so our net obligation was 10.8 million. And then we had a net contribution of 979. So now we're down to 9.8 million in our actuarial. Now, you know, how does this help us? Well, in January, you're going to have a resolution to pass some more bonds, because we're moving along on our facilities and our bond funds, and we're in need of some more money for 1920. So when our ratings for bonds come up, they look at this. One of the biggest questions they ask is, one, are you community funded yet? Because they know we've been teetering. Two, they say, are you funding your actuarial? And now we can say 100% yes, and we're doing really well on it. And three, they'll ask us, what are you doing about PERS and STIRS? And that's a huge concern of theirs. And we're saying we're funding it and paying it as we go. And that's the best we can do right now. So this is all good. This is good news. And I'm hoping that when we go up for a bond rating and on January 17th, that we will at least keep our bond rating right now. Until we get heavily into basic aid, we'll never be the top bond rating. We'll never hit that. So, but we are up there, and we have a really good bond rating. So.
What's our current bond rating right now?
I knew you were going to ask that. I think Moody's and Standard & Poor's is a AA, and Moody's is a double. I'll do a Friday memo on it.
We'll look it up. We're like, I think, AA, capital A, lowercase a plus. In the world of municipal bond ratings, we're good. And it was interesting when I went with Meg to the ratings. Santa Barbara, just the name helped. The perception of the name helped, even though our finances were moderate. So I was struck by that. Yeah.
Any questions? Did I skip over something too fast?
Board members, any questions or comments?
Okay.
Ms. Ford?
Thanks for this. I'm wondering if is there a consistent pattern in terms of the 80% for staff?
You mean, are we always like in the 80s? Yeah, we're, as there was a difference when you had one-time funds, because it increases your overall budget, but yet your staff, you had the same amount of staff, and if you didn't give a raise or anything. So we run between 80, 82, 84%.
So it's not raising, even though things like STIRS, et cetera, and salaries are raising?
Well, and also the overall budget is raising, so it's proportionate. You know what? Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I always notice things listening. If you look at page 15, I just need to check with Ms. Jate. I'm looking at the increase due to PERS and STIRS. So that's 2019-20. That's projected for next year, correct? Scroll back up a little, Brian. The increase due to PERS and STIRS, it was 2.199 million. Now it's going up to 2.443.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 2019-20. Regardless of the year, that number, I'm just doing some sense making here for myself and then for us. The STIRS and PERS increases that we are all facing as public agencies, these are big changes. That's a one-year growth. I mean, I'm not going to quote what that means in terms of compensation. We'll educate the board about that down the road. But to have an increase in 1 year of STIRS and PERS of $2.4 million, when people ask, where's our money going? Well, it's going a lot of places. But this pension increase, and it's going to keep going until I think it's 2021, and the numbers cap out at some extraordinarily high percentages.
Actually goes to 24, 25.
Oh my gosh. So it's just a long, steady climb. It's It's a struggle. I mean, I wish we had resources for compensation for a program, but these are just mandated by retirement law. Those are big numbers. So just something mindful for us as we make decisions for the future. That's just a reason for caution. Now, I will say this is because we're on the, we're really going to be basic aid or community funded for the long haul as we get into the 2020s. But my observation, it's a slow change to that. It's going to grow, but it's not going to grow super fast. I wish it would grow faster. The AV number that Ms. Jate quoted, she estimated 3. It came in at 4.97%. You can kind of see that in the local development. Goleta is building a fair amount of housing. Anytime you see a hotel being built or renovated, that's property taxes. Will that sustain? I think the Santa Barbara community is pretty healthy. It's good to be basic aid. If the state goes into recession, I think we're going to be basic aid and we're insulated from that. So that bodes well for the future. We just still have to be somewhat cautious.
Seeing no additional comments, I'm assuming you're looking for action on this, but it just says positive certification. Are you seeking for us to approve?
Yes,
Okay.
approval of the budget.
Do I hear a motion to approve the positive certification of first interim financial report for fiscal year 2018-19?
So moved.
Here a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Tay, and thank you for always being so willing to, and be patient with us about things we
Yeah, no
want.
worries. It's complicated.
Yes. So moving to item 9, approval of network switching and firewall refresh proposal. Mr. Rickman.
Good evening, and congratulations, President Sims-Mosen
Thank
and Ms. Capps, Dr. Reed, and welcome to our 2 new board members. I don't have too much to add into the narrative that I already provided. I just am open to questions. I'll let you know that the refresh will take, the whole project will take about a year to complete.
Any questions or comment, board? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion approved. Thank you.
Couldn't sit down fast enough.
Item 10, approval for purchase of instructional materials to build leveled libraries for balanced literacy model implementation in all elementary schools. Dr. Ramirez.
Hi, good evening, board. Ms. Ford and Ms. Munoz, welcome to your new roles in the community. And our returning board members, welcome to your new roles as well. As the narrative kind of details, what we are putting forward is a proposal for funding of level libraries, specifically in grades, in the upper grades. I guess it would be the major focal point. Some of the quotes that you see cited there are listed by schools. You'll see different figures based on the fact that there are different, in years past, we have made purchases, and we are trying to get ourselves to be one-to-one in our TK6 classrooms. You'll also see a bit of a different design around Adams, because over the years they've been really leading the pack in terms of these materials, and we are making some accommodations for them as well. So the narrative intends to give you a high-level view of what we've put forward in the elementary schools around literacy the last really 3 years, and we're just trying to continue down that path. So with that said, I will certainly answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions from the board? Ms. Capps?
Yeah, I just want to, I read this is part of a 5-year plan. Is that what am I confusing that with the next?
No, that's accurate. What we have done is tried to pace this around the components of balanced literacy, beginning with writing workshop, 3 years ago in the lower grades, then making our way to the upper grades. We're in a position now to try to accelerate on that. So even though the purchase will be made this year, we were waiting for for this budget, no less, to be able to understand what carryover funds, if any, were available, and that's what precipitated our move to try to accommodate now in preparation for the professional learning that's going to be launched in the upper grades. June of 2019 is the anticipated, but knowing that those materials are very good to have in hand now, if possible.
Great, and I'd love if you could speak to, because this 5-year plan, this is $300,000. Do we have my first question is, do we have a sense of the budget total? My second one is on teacher input. If you can speak to, when you're making these decisions of these new books, what kind of involvement of the teachers, and when they arrive, what kind of instruction takes place with how to use them. As we've spoken in the past, there's been some confusion at the school that I'm at twice a day about which books are these, how comes different schools get that, and it seems as though if there is this 5-year plan, there's still remaining confusion about what the plan is and at what point certain books are coming and what they are and how they should be received.
Sure. The level libraries, these particular ones are identified there, are aligned to the units of study in the Teachers College reading and writing project units of study. Lucy Calkins, oftentimes referred to as the Lucy Calkins units of study. We have continued to onboard those over the years. Last year we made a purchase in the upper grades in particular, but not to get us to a point of 1-to-1. Now, in terms of what we as a district using district funds have stepped into is securing those for every classroom. Independent of that, schools have been purchasing just sets depending on what their independent needs are. Most recently, we were able to provide every school, depending on their size, anywhere between 10 and 15,000 to start making some of those independent choices, recognizing that schools have, for example, in Adams, they have onboarded more quickly because they had some donors, some donations that allowed them to step into that space last year. Whereas at a school like Roosevelt, that was impossible. So you'll see the purchase for Roosevelt and Washington happens to be the largest based on the fact that that they have not received those materials in the past. So I would say that many of the classrooms that I've been a part of have kind of been expecting this, and I've been letting them know that this would be coming. And as far as the professional learning around how to use them, that's where the work of our literacy coaches now and also our partnership with Literacy Partners is helping to provide that professional learning on an ongoing basis, with a launch expected around reading workshop more formally in June of 2019.
And then just if you could speak to the teacher input on the front end.
The teacher input has been largely on again, professional learning opportunities. Most recently, you saw also a component of this is the foundational materials that we've had, where we had a process that kind of undertook that. So it's kind of been a number of different avenues, including most recently school chats that Ms. Lockridge and I undertook, where we talked regularly to teachers and let them know that this is something that we were looking to bring forward. I'll be at Roosevelt on Thursday, as a matter of fact, for a school chat.
Thank you.
Additional comments from other members? Okay. May I have a motion to approve this item? To approve the purchase of instructional materials to build leveled libraries for balanced literacy model implementation in all elementary schools. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. And our final action item, approval of San Marcos High School's plan for school-wide Title I status. Ms. Carey.
Good evening, board members, and I would just echo the warm welcomes and hearty congratulations of my colleagues earlier. I'm bringing this forward on behalf of Dr. Rundhaug and the San Marcos High School Site Council. As Ms. Jeté was referencing earlier, when we're talking about the restricted side of the budget and federal funds that are earned by, in this case, Title I students and intend to be spent on students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or are failing or at risk of failing or performing below grade level, that is the intention of for Title I funds. In our district, we have schools that are what we call Title I schools, so they receive Title I and can use those dollars school-wide. And then we have schools who are identified as what we call targeted assistance schools, meaning enough students qualify for a certain dollar amount, to be allocated to that site for spending on Title I students, but are not to be used school-wide. And so then there's some attendant procedures that have to come into play in terms of ensuring that those dollars are being spent on Title I identified students, not being spent school-wide or universally, as can happen at the Title I schools. We have identified 3 schools that are positioned to make the transition from being targeted assistance schools to Title I schools, where we can spend Title I dollars school-wide and in more universal ways. San Marcos High School, Santa Barbara High School, and Goleta Valley Junior High. So San Marcos High School has been the first to kind of run with this momentum. It was actually somewhat challenging to get guidance about how to sort of meet the necessary bureaucratic thresholds in order to petition to become a Title I school as opposed to a targeted assistance school. We got some advisement from Ventura County contacts. We got some advisement from CDE. And what we understand is needed is the school-wide plan that you see, and that had to articulate with the school's adopted and approved SIPSA. So you see both things attached there. The SIPSA, the Single Plan for Student Achievement, is the one that was approved last spring based on the allocation that was made at that time. Again, this is sort of echoes of Ms. Jeté's presentation. There was carryover that San Marcos received, as well as all school sites received in Title I, and so you'll see some dollar amounts there, proposed expenditures embedded in the school-wide plan that speak to how the school site council has authorized and approved the proposed expenditure of Title I dollars. So this is coming before you, having met with site council approval, and it's now pending your approval, and we pending your questions and comments. We are hopeful to use San Marcos's journey and these artifacts as kind of a template for moving the other 2 schools who might be eligible to become Title I schools forward in the process, which will in turn affect both dollars earned and allocations to those sites, but most principally the way in which sites can then expend Title I monies. Open to your questions and comments.
Dr. Reed?
Yes, I think this is great to see. I wanted to commend San Marcos High School for moving forward so quickly, and I was curious to know what other schools would fall within this, so thank you for sharing that. Are there plans for, I know you said if we approve this and moving forward, are there plans in the making at Santa Barbara High School and Goleta Valley Junior High? So they are on the same track?
Correct. We've met with all 3 principals and myself and Dr. Ann Roundy Harder just to sort of think about let's make sure that this is the right way to go about this and meets with approval at all levels, and then we'll kind of pattern the other 2 schools after this process.
So my other question, thank you. My other question is around the increased parent engagement and just wanting to understand what that means. So that could mean a variety of things. So I'm curious something more transparent about what that means.
Mm-hmm. I'm representing San Marcos. I'm representing Dr. Rundhaug on the site council. What I know about that, and you'll see references to that across the different areas of the SIPSA where there is a nexus to any SIPSA identified goals. But specifically, I know there's been a lot of dialogue this school year about language access, and I know there's been dialogue about extending the services to parents that are afforded by the bilingual community coordinator. So able to kind of extend through overtime or, extended hours on a workday or extended into the summer months even, that support for families who are monolingual Spanish speaking.
I think that's great, because I think one of the conversations that I was hearing from parents was the need for more interpretation and more access for parents. So I was just curious if the funding would then go towards that. And what about simultaneous translation? Is that being?
So that's the model for any language access in our district as far as interpretation goes. So these funds, what's being proposed here is that these funds would be able to be used by the site to build up some of those systems that in turn will be able to deliver language access according to the guidelines established by our district.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional comments? I do have a comment. So I think congratulations is awarded moving from target assistance versus to Title I, and I'm assuming, is there another goal to get out of Title I status, or?
I don't know that our demographic profile in our district would ever position us to be having that as any kind of near-term goal.
Okay. And then my second question would be that some of the issues that are identified in this plan, they're continuous, they continue to happen.
Correct.
So,
this is building on their ongoing and
building on those
efforts.
So are we looking at different strategies to address it differently to hopefully have a different outcome?
I think what you're seeing here is really an expansion of some services and actions, and then some different strategies, a combination of some new ideas and some expanded ideas. I mean, the bilingual community coordinator is an example of expanding an existing service. But when we talk about some of these aspects that have to do with professional learning and the school's instructional focus, there's a lot of new activity there.
Okay, appreciate it. That's any additional comments? Okay. We have a motion to approve San Marcos High School Plan School-wide Title I status. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This is our time that we take a quick break between our action items and our report discussion agenda. So do I have the pleasure of the board to take a break? Okay. All right, so before we go into our discussion items, I wanted to go back to our closed session. Earlier, Dr. Reed announced that we had taken action in closed session on item B1. We just need to announce the vote, and it was 5-0. The vote was 5-0 on action. Okay. All right, so we will move to our first discussion item, and that is the first reading of the Board Policy Series 3000, Business and Non-Instructional Operations. Mr. Vizzolini.
Good evening again. This item is before you as a first reading for Board Policy 3514, which is environmental safety, and Board Policy 3514.1, which is hazardous substances. The edits made were recommended by the California School Boards Association, and I'm prepared to bring it back next board meeting for final approval, pending your questions.
Any comments or questions on this policy?
Yeah, I had a
Ms.
question.
Capps?
Just again, given we had a serious circumstance at La Cumbra this last year, how does this policy address what happened?
Well, we are, this policy actually designates away from the board that that the superintendent or his designate take care of this, for one thing. So we now have a safety coordinator in place, and we've already made some inroads on what's appropriate for chem labs in the junior high schools, what's appropriate overall for chem labs, what kind of training do the teachers need, for instance. There's been no real record about who takes care of training the chemistry teacher. It's not the facilities department, it's not, an administrator, so that's a loophole. So we're working, Kelly Moore and myself met with a consultant, and we've got a plan moving forward with our maintenance department to address mechanical and system issues as far as fume hoods, things like that. And then we have a plan moving forward on how we're going to get trained. We're talking about putting together something for the teacher training at San Marcos each year, where it may be required for new teachers to come in and do an inductive training, learn what the PPE is supposed to be, those types of things. So we're definitely putting a plan together, and Kelly's working pretty diligently on it.
Well, that's reassuring. I didn't quite understand, but it makes total sense that Kelly Moore's job would also incorporate this kind of safety as well. So
Yeah,
that's
we're kind of working in
important.
tandem.
Sure. Great. Wonderful.
Additional comments, questions? All right, Mr. Vizzolini, are you asking to bring this back on for the second reading?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Boy, thank you.
Thank you.
As yeah,
That'll be
on the
on the consent agenda for January, yeah.
Okay, yes, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tay. Okay, item number 2, the first reading and discussion of 3 board policies in 5,000 series students. Ms. Dr. Wagner.
Good evening, board, and I guess I'm the last one up here, so welcome to our new board members. And congratulations to our veterans on their new positions. Thank you for your service. I bring to you 3 board policies tonight. The first is the first 2 are CSBA updates, and the first is to quote Kate Parker, it is CSBA boilerplate, and I did that intentionally this time because I did want the board's input on it, specifically related to the use, the collection and use of students' personal information for marketing. And so there's that piece. There's also guidelines on how the superintendent or designees should seek input from parents on issues related to disclosing student information, administering surveys, granting parents the opportunity to review surveys that we may administer, and also it calls out specifically non-emergency physical examinations such as vision, dental, et cetera. So I think at this point, our time's best spent if I open it up for your questions and comments.
Board members, any questions or comments? No comments or questions?
Okay, great. I just wanted to, on that one, I just wanted to make sure that the board didn't have any specific questions on the use of student information for the purposes of marketing, and we will continue to be judicious with student information. So moving on to Board Policy 5111.1, District Residency. Specifically, this is another update related to the rights of students in terms of their citizenship or immigration status. Specifically calls out that when establishing student residency for enrollment purposes, the district will not inquire into citizenship or immigration status, not only of the parents, but also of their family members. So any questions on that?
Any questions? You know, back in 2016, we did pass a resolution. Is it related to that? The immigration status?
That was the resolution, I think, at you all's first board meeting, I believe.
Yeah.
About a month and maybe 5 weeks after the election, and that was specifically directed at calling out that we would protect our students regardless of their status, of their residency status. So I think that the district was doing at that time what other districts around the state of California and across the nation were doing, which was making a statement that schools are safe spaces. And the state of California has followed suit in calling that out specifically in terms of board policies and recommendations and our laws.
Right, Ms. Capps.
Yeah, I'm interested to know if this was, this change is coming down from CSBA, or is this was motivated by something that you all are experiencing?
This is specifically an update from CSBA.
Excellent.
Just continuously refining and tweaking these board policies.
I wonder too if we can, communicate this one in some way. I think this would be a nice.
I think
nice thing to communicate.
There are regular updates,
Yeah.
and I think one. I was speaking with a group of school counselors recently that they're especially concerned with our recent our students who've recently come here who are new English learners from Central America, specifically Honduras and Guatemala, and concerned about their mental health issues. And so in my mind, that I was thinking about, we have to kind of, from time to time, keep reiterating our commitment to those families and to those students.
Yeah, and I don't suggest sharing this policy because that's certainly not very
No.
helpful. But perhaps through the DLAC, I mean, you have ideas about that, but I think it would be a nice thing to, especially since we're taking action.
Right.
Actually, we're not taking action today, but
No.
when we do.
On consent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally,
Ms. Dr. Wagner.
yes, Ms. Ford.
Dr.
Thanks.
Reed and then Ms. Ford.
Oh, okay.
Actually, all I was going to say was what your question was, which was the transparency and the communication and messaging out of this policy and how that might be done, so.
And I was going to add a little bit of a cautionary note, which was not only did we have to get that information out to parents so that they would feel calmer and more secure, but also a lot of staff members just really aren't up on what the latest law is or board policy. So I'd love to have that also be part of the strategy, is getting it out to all the staff members,
Right.
so even teachers know.
That's an important point, and we have talked about that with different groups, that even with good intentions, we should not be asking those questions, and so whether it's within counseling or with teaching. Also, we regularly work with our registrars and elementary office managers who do enroll families to make sure that they absolutely understand the law. But that is an important point, making sure that folks understand the why of that, because again, even in the best of intentions, that can happen. All right, thank you. Now, finally, moving on to Board Policy 5117. There is a minor change, and that's on the top of page 2. Last year, when we updated this policy to harden the deadlines around our transfers, we didn't make the change to the interdistrict transfer policy. So what I'm asking you all to consider is that late applications for interdistrict transfers will be accepted, but they will not be reviewed prior to August 1st. And that was an oversight from last year when we updated the intra-district transfer policy.
Okay.
Okay.
We're good?
Okay, thank you very much.
So we'll be bringing these back on consent for
Back
the
on
second reading?
consent, yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. All right, moving forward to 3, first reading and discussion of 4 board policies in Series 6000 instruction. Ms. Carey and Dr. Ramirez.
Good evening again. We're bringing these policies before you. As you might note, they are long overdue updates, almost a decade overdue. And it's not coincidental. It's because there was so much transition in this space, and we've had lots of occasion to talk about this, whether we're reviewing our local indicators as part of our LCAP reporting, or whether we're bringing before you updates and requests for approval of acquisition of instructional materials. But broadly speaking, these 4 board policies are asking, or what they'll be putting into language is just policy that is commensurate with the shifts in instruction and in standards, so that we are stating that our instructional practice is aligned to Common Core standards. You'll see specific you'll see even more specificity about instruction as is pertinent. For example, in the one on math, you'll see the standards for mathematical practice called out. When it comes to science, you'll see next generation science standards called out. So where there's even something more pertinent to speak to, you'll see that. And I don't know if this was originally timed to come before you in October in conjunction with our LCAP priority, local priority indicator reports around sufficiency of curriculum, instructional materials, and standards. But it's coming before you now, and we're here. I would say Dr. Ramirez might have opening comments, or we're here to respond to any questions or comments you would have.
No, we'd like to afford you the opportunity to ask us any questions.
Dr. Reed?
So I just had a question with the history, social science instruction. Was there going to be any reference to the new ethnic studies requirement or anything relational to cultural proficiency?
There wouldn't be in this board policy, but in 6146 on high school graduation requirements, that's, that shows up there, as you know from our work on massaging how that policy should read and should present. This is more global. It talks about the frameworks, the state frameworks, the state standards. It is interesting. I mean, there's pieces in here about other sources for historical knowledge.
Right.
I appreciate the references to. Sorry, maybe we'll forgive a former social studies teacher for appreciating that on NPR this morning. I heard a new telling of the lone woman from San Nicolas Island, based now on transcribed, transcripts of oral history from Native Americans. So we've, had that story kind of wrong. She was not all alone for that time on San Nicolas Island. So see me later if you want more details, but I appreciate.
What do we do with the book?
I know. What is Scott Odell going to do? I was concerned by the same thing. Anyhow, there you'll see some call-outs to, I think, what you're asking about, but nothing that references anything as specific as our local graduation requirement here in this board policy.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions?
I was just going to say, though, it does look like you've referenced some additional ed code around that specific issue. Instruction in civil rights, genocide, slavery, Holocaust, and deportation to Mexico, and ethnic studies.
Mm-hmm. And that is coming from CSBA as well. So we did not include that, but it is included there, correct? Because that is ed code. So much as with the position with respect to immigrant students, undocumented students, it's sort of something where we were a little bit ahead on the wave of that. Additional comments, questions? Okay. That reference is on page 3, Brian, if you wanted to scroll down and show what Ms. Ford is referring to.
Scroll up.
There you go. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
Would it be okay to come back on consent?
Yes. Pleasure of the board. Yes. Okay. Awesome. All right.
Just
Ms. Ford?
kind of underscoring that, also that need for good communication about this. I think, in particular, the science one is very clear that this is, that we're only doing science that's based on fact, and that that probably includes that evolution will be taught. And so,
Page 1, Brian, of science.
I just hope that there's a plan for communication of that, not only to teachers, but to parents. Unless you're saying this actually does reflect what's actually happening.
I feel that this, I'm looking over at Dr. Becchio, who's a former colleague of mine for many years in the high school setting. I feel like this is reflective of what the reality is in science classrooms. I'm not familiar with, I can think of only a couple instances across maybe 15 years in multiple school sites where I heard otherwise. But if you feel like that would be something that's just kind of for the good of the order, nice to be able to communicate out, that's certainly something we can execute on.
I would think so, just because I think Rose might agree with me that these questions about science came up in our forums during the election.
I'm sorry, up higher. So you might have had it before, but the shall not be taught. It's right below this. Right the. So, there we go. Philosophical religious theories. This is the part you're referencing, right? From the page 1 of the, yeah. I'm sorry, could you say a little bit more about that, as I was distracted about that part, that in your...
There just seems to be a lot of interest, I think, in sort of in finding out just how much the district wants to teach along the lines of scientific fact versus scientific theory, and a number of, even some of the questionnaires that we got from different community groups were aimed at getting at thoughts about that, as well as religion, literature, sex education. I think there are lots of people out there that are wondering exactly where the line is in the sand.
Okay, and so I'm
Does that
hearing
make
now.
sense?
Yes, I'm hearing behind
Okay.
your question now that you're saying, hearing more from community and maybe families or parents, as opposed to hearing from staff, but that could be helpful messaging for our community, families, and parents.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. That's good.
Okay, we'll bring them back on consent. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving on to our last item on the reports. Report on evaluation of Title I programs. Dr. Marison Carey, get to stay up there.
I'm fortunate. So I again, thank you for the opportunity to present on this particular topic. You heard some components of Title I discussed both in the budget and in the earlier item that Ms. Carey presented relative to San Marcos, moving forward with identifying their program school-wide as opposed to targeted. Mr. Rouse, if you don't mind, I would, just the other attachment, just for context. I included this because it's just a high-level view of where our accountability and annual planning around that entails. It references the year-long process that we undertake for LCAP, but it was just a good document to keep coming back to with the board as we present these topics. This particular evaluation is for 17-18, and we had originally talked about having it earlier in the year, but there were just many items that obviously had to take precedent. But moving forward, where we hope to land it, and it won't just be around Title I, but rather federal programs, will be to really align it with our single plans, our school plans, our LCAP, because what you will see is actually very much connected and aligned. So we went as far to identify those actions relative to LCAP goals. So of our 5 LCAP goals, that was the way to orient the services around Title I. And so this is just intended to give you some context about how we would like to bring this forward to the board, just to help orient everybody around particularly the evaluation, which can mean different things to different people. And understanding that we have undertaken a lot of our evaluation and input gathering relative to some of these activities as it relates to LCAP, which we try to continue to push forward as the foundation upon which much of our evaluation and informing happens. So I just wanted to provide a quick glimpse on this before launching into some of the discrete items that are identified within the activities. Can you come back to the other form? So, the first part is just a background. Another point of interest for the board, earlier this spring in April, we actually concluded a review of our federal programs, and this was one of the items that was called out as not being really clear and present as a cultural practice, and that's why we really wanted to take a hard look. We did notice the misalignment, and so that's why this is for 17-18. We want to correct that, not only to satisfy that requirement, but rather to establish as an ongoing cultural practice to just evaluate at the right time, largely so that our planning moving forward can be informed by those evaluations and those data gathering opportunities. So although LCAP has 5 goals, not all of these activities are necessarily aligned to each one. So LCAP Goal 1 around organizational transformation based on a culturally proficient district, that is not something that is explicitly tied in. Some of the activities may relate to that, but for our purposes, we just wanted to highlight goals 2, 3, and 4 as being the bulk of where activities happen to reside. So I won't go point by point, but I'll just make a broad point that in Goal 2, it is to increase the sense of connectedness and safety among students. And the way that this document in particular is oriented, it identifies the actions, activities, and strategies in one column, and they're enumerated. Next to it, what is working, just wanted to have some plain speak of what we have found to be effective. Some of this language is also contained in our annual update, in the LCAP annual update, which is helpful, again, for consistency's sake. What is not working? What is ineffective? And we want to be as clear as possible in identifying where there may be a reorientation or a change, or where maybe not enough information is yet gathered to make some ongoing determinations. And finally, where the modification is based on evaluation of results. So the challenge with this, as always, is not all of it's difficult sometimes to, on an ongoing basis, capture all points of information and interest, particularly those qualitative pieces. But we're doing the best that we can to capture that again in LCAP and then reflect it here. So in Goal 2, you'll see the family engagement liaisons, and you'll see that those are important components. Some of that, again, is cited in LCAP. Those are a pretty significant fixture in terms of our parent engagement and our parent programming. So the second piece is social worker. This is a position directed at supporting our homeless and foster youth, primarily our homeless, and you'll see some data points there that, again, come directly from the annual update. So I wanted to really provide a succinct narrative to give the board a clear view, and the public a clear view of how we're using our funds, and then try to communicate how those are going to be now in current year 18-19. So I'll stop there. I'll just put a pause and just see if there are any questions that the board would like to ask at this, or commentary that you would like to provide.
Yes, Ms. Moniz.
I like the format and, and the way that the data is put out, in terms of what's working and effective. I really like the way it's explained here and it's shown. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, you'll see some of that language reflected in the annual update, and we try to just make sure that there was consistency there, because again, some of these are cornerstone actions and activities that happen as a function of LCAP as well. Thank you.
Ms. Ford.
Thanks. So I am understanding, I think, that there was a request or a requirement that more detail is given as to the plans to evaluate your Title I program. Is that right?
It's a process that is residual. So LCAP really only focuses on our supplemental funds. Those are state funds. For these particular activities, these are all based on federal funds. So we're kind of toggling between two accountability systems. So our goal, and we consulted with CDE to make sure that there was an opportunity to align, and they were fine with that, because we don't see those as disparate funds. I mean, we're all kind of orienting around some very core goals. So yes, this is an opportunity to reflect just specifically those activities that are part of Title I, but in close connection with what's already been articulated publicly in a broader document as part of the LCAP.
So, but what you're sharing with us, sorry about the mic, but what you're sharing with us then is the evaluation of the program from 17-18, right?
Correct.
So I just had a question sort of related to what Ms. Capps brought up earlier about professional learning around balanced literacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's number 3.
Yes.
And you described some activities that are happening in 18-19. I wonder if you could give a little bit more detail about that?
Sure. Maybe you can scroll.
Partnering the schools up and what the actual coaching entails?
Yes. So the coaching, we onboarded literacy coaches through our LCAP process. At the end of 17-18, board approved those activities as part of the LCAP. From then moving forward, there were 3 people in that role that were hired on, And they are now splitting assignments between our elementary schools. We also capitalized on the fact that there were 2 schools that had people or staff working in similar type roles and just brought them into a cohort. So for example, we have a literacy coach that is assigned to McKinley and Monroe. That is a split assignment. Another one that is split between Washington and Franklin. Another that is split between Roosevelt and Adams. Another one that is a part-time position that is exclusively at Harding, that serves as their IB coordinator. We wanted to bring that person into that role. And finally, one that is co-funded from district and site funds over at Adams. And some additional support provided to SBCA in their transition. So what we did was we started to partner those schools in order to provide opportunities together. And what that looks like is we've been partnering with an outside consultant, and that's where this is referencing, to come in and provide some of that professional learning. And so what happens, and it's happening to these 3 days at Cleveland, for example, a partnership between Cleveland and Harding. And what's happening there is they literally have lab site days. So those are half-day opportunities where there is a coach either facilitating or partnering in teaching of a lesson relative to writing, reading workshop. In addition to that, the literacy coaches have been participating in coaching cycles. We have prioritized our new teachers to the district, new teachers to the profession, or new teachers to a grade level. That because we knew that was going to be the audience that would need the most immediate support. And so Ms. Lockridge, who was here earlier, has been regularly meeting on a weekly or bi-weekly meeting, reviewing logs, and the feedback that has emerged from schools has been pretty positive, because they have felt that that's been a need, is somebody to really thought partner with, somebody that can model lessons, procure certain materials, data sets, help them with some of the challenges around some of the new data sets that are emerging, like running records. So it's really been a very good transition. 2 of our coaches were former and longtime teachers in the district. And that's part of the reason why the partnerships emerged, because we wanted to capitalize from the existing relationships that happened at those schools. Miss Amy Gates and Barbara Conway, 2 very well respected and really kind of cherished members of that staff. We didn't want to pull them away and have them start from scratch at 2 sites, rather capitalize on the momentum they had there. And then we hired one coach externally that has really come on board. And so we have really prioritized their professional growth, their professional collaboration, and in turn looked at some of the scheduling to make these things happen cross-site, so that there can be a sharing of practices and environments more freely.
So does that mean that some of the funds are being used for release time, for planning?
In this case, it's for the facilitation that's coming in. We're looking to sunset that, within the next year, to draw that down as we build up our capacity. And that was the reason for the literacy coaches. The release time has actually been provided by reorienting the time when students are with their PE, art, and music teachers. So without sacrificing that time, it's just been reoriented to different blocks of time to diminish the need for subs, because we recognize that that's it's a challenge to secure, number one. Number two, it's just a loss of time with kids and the inconsistency that may arise. And what better than to just capitalize on the audience that they or the programming that already exists and just reorient it for those weeks.
Thanks.
Additional comments, board members?
The other piece that I will just say with this is within each goal, consistent with LCAP, you'll see that there are site-based allocations, and you'll see kind of a broad base of a broad menu of activities that we've identified and that you'll soon see come the spring around school plans. So that's another piece. And just my closing comments is that as we look to align this better in the spring, early summer, one of the things that we'll see is that there will be continued call out to references in LCAP to just make it more concrete for you and for the public around where you can gather more information or where some of the evaluation of the data resides.
Dr. Reed?
I just wanted to say thank you, like Rose, or Ms. Munoz. The practical application of what is actually being done in people speak, so that we can all understand what exactly is being done, what was the challenge, and these are the modifications. So I just want to appreciate the language.
Thank you.
No additional comments, so we good with that?
Thank you.
Okay. Woo-hoo. So, board meeting one. I have a couple things I just want to go back. We did leave out a committee that we need someone to serve on, and that is the County Santa Barbara Schools Board Association, which meets in Buellton. I think, Dr. Reed, you had mentioned that. That meets monthly in Buellton, and still have some volunteers for that committee.
And the meeting is, I believe, at 9 a.m., so it's a morning meeting. So just for your planning purposes.
It's monthly, I believe, right?
Monthly.
Monthly.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Okay. All right, Ms. Ford. Thank you. Okay, don't we even bring any additional items back? Coming events. Tomorrow morning, we have the Partnership for Education breakfast in the morning at 7.
Breakfast starts at 7. Program starts at 7:30.
Okay.
So you can plan accordingly.
Accordingly.
Oh, Mr. Ortiz
Oh. Oh.
on the panel.
Well, okay. I just had a question, and it can certainly be, I'm not sure if, Ms. Carey, it may be for you. I met with a few members of the community with regards to board policy, and I don't know the number, but about recruitment policies. Do we review that policy annually, or is there a certain time of the year that that gets reviewed? The truth and recruitment, yes, thank you.
We don't have a standing meeting schedule. We've just had occasion to meet with that group because we were in the throes of, actually, my predecessors were in the throes of kind of revamping the policy, and that was the bulk of the work. And then there were a few tweaks we needed to make even after the heavy lift was done. And
yes.
I think you were involved in a couple of those
Yes.
tweaks, and one of those came about because of the transition to digital registration from paper registration, but we resolved those matters. So am I hearing that there's a call to meet?
Well, not necessarily to meet, but to review the policy, just like we've reviewed several board policies. Is there an optimal time to do that, either before, like a showcase or something where recruiting would be, heavily being done, such as even when the colleges are on the campus?
There's not a set time, other than the registration of students. So there's the opt-out, options that families can exercise annually during the summer as part of the enrollment packets. Not enrollment packets, but registration process. Dr. Reaganek, I caught myself. And then there are sporadic, college fair and other, but those are not all timed as happening necessarily in the same season.
Okay. So maybe, one of the requests was to have it just reviewed annually as part of board policies that we review, that it's getting reviewed. So I don't know how practical that is, but that just thought I'd bring that back.
I guess I would just say, does the board have a desire to look anew at the policy on post-secondary recruitment? So this applies to branches of the military, but also post-secondary institutions of learning. It was heavy traffic there for a while, but I
Right.
think we've got to a place of some good resolution of items. So it's whether we want to open that back up again.
It was reviewing that part. I know there was revamping of it, so we probably met a little bit more regularly around that piece. But the request was just, can it just come a part of keeping it up in the forefront as opposed to in the back? But again, that I can open it up to the board as we want that as part of reviewing our board policies. But I just want to be responsive to that request. And
I could add too that I've made it a practice to annually review the policy with site leaders.
Okay.
So that is something that's in place, even though that's an internal kind of annual cycle of reminders that we're on.
And I think that maybe we communicate that out to that group in
Yeah.
terms of that that's actually
They
going
know
on. 'Cause
that.
I think,
I know
but maybe to reiterate, and maybe they
Yes.
thought I didn't know that was going on, and I didn't know to the extent how often it was going on, but that may satisfy that request in terms of that we actually do that annual review with site administrators.
Yeah, I would just add, yeah, I think that would be what the specificity about it. They want to make sure that it is with new site leaders that come aboard.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a change happens all the time with administration. So with that change, just making sure this is an ongoing analysis.
So I just want to be clear. So is the request that I initiate communication with representatives of that group to assure them that we have built that into our annual kind of procedures?
Yes.
Okay.
I would think that would satisfy their request. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Any additional or future items?
Yeah.
Ms. Capps?
I would like to bring forth, thanks to the Monroe kindergarten teacher, the climate change resolution.
Yes.
Thanks.
Ms. Capps, do you have access to any other sort of resolution language from all of your work?
I can certainly ask, but I was just reading this one. I could do a little research.
Yeah, if you come across any other, whether it's counties, cities, or school districts, just be good to have some options in terms of language.
Sure.
Okay.
Ms. Ford?
Just in order to understand protocol, is this where we might suggest future agenda items?
Yes.
In the,
Yes.
in the meeting? I'd love to request that in closed session in January, that Rose and I have an orientation to Mr. Matsuoka's evaluation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Okay, and I just wanted to ask what you just brought up about Monroe. I didn't catch it. I didn't.
Oh, I asked the Monroe teacher who spoke about the climate change resolution that we all have a copy of. She's asked a couple times if we might take it up, and I think we should.
Okay.
So I
Thank you.
requested, so this is the time that we can request future agenda items. So I'm just putting this on the docket.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we will work together on when that could come, either the January 15th or the January 29th, just to make sure that we're not crowding up an agenda.
With regards to?
The resolution that you want to bring forth on the
Resolution.
next, right, that we were thinking for the next meeting, or just one?
Whenever there's time, but it's
Yeah.
certainly not a, well,
not urgent,
it could be a
Yeah.
lengthy discussion, but I don't assume it would be.
Yeah. So
Again, just
just
looking
work with you on that.
looking at the language, it's really a value statement than it is anything else.
Okay.
And with regards to superintendent evaluation in closed session, would be okay to work with Ms. Sims-Moten about the timing of that, whether it's January 15th or 29th? I'm just mindful that I think we have a few other topics that are going to need the board attention on the 15th. Okay.
Ms. Munoz?
And if I,
Are you on is your mic on? I don't think your mic was on.
I don't feel the need myself to have, a review of the superintendent evaluation.
Okay. Then perhaps we can meet with Ms. Ford. Is that your request to look at that? Okay, we'll get to work together on that.
And then I have two scheduling questions for the board. The first, Dr. Reed was trying to find a board retreat date with our CSBA consultant, and I can't remember if we've landed on a date.
February didn't work, and so now I think our options are, if they're still open, would be March, the last 3 Saturdays in March, if she still has held them, Ms. Dudley. So the Saturdays, March 16th, I don't have a calendar in front of me. The Saturdays, the last 3 Saturdays in March is what I can just remember.
Are you willing to be the liaison with her to try to figure this out, or would you like to transfer that to Madame President?
Well, whatever Madame President would like.
So I'm not going to say that. But anyway, I'm fine. We can actually work together with you on it too as well. So we can work together and get a date.
Yeah, just mindful that spring break happens towards the end of March. I mean, we can we can work around that, but it's just, I feel it's important to get that on the calendar.
Right. Okay.
The other calendar framework, and I'll put some dates. I just wanted to test this off all 5 of you. We struggled to get through board policy review. We put things on, and then sometimes it's too late, and we just don't get to it. We actually got through some board policy tonight. The backlog of total board policy numbers, I don't even want to quote you a number, but it's a lot. At the last retreat with the prior board, the request was, could we schedule an alternate Tuesday board meeting, 1 hour long, and just try to get through some board policy. The time, I checked with a couple of you, 5:30 to 6:30. Does that work? So we meet on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays, so we're starting to look at, it's probably the 3rd Tuesday in between. Sometimes it might have to be the 1st Tuesday, but I'm just checking for, like, does this work? I see enough head nods. So we're going to take a pass at January through May and find one Tuesday in addition to our scheduled board meetings. Now, we also have a tradition of the board reviews 17 school plans. We call it that's a round robin. You get to review, I think it's 4 plans out of the 17. You can't review all 17. And we set up a rotational schedule. We'll need an hour and a half for that one. And so we'll put that out far enough in advance so that you can try to work it backwards with your schedules. We have found that to be really effective for the board and for principals. It's just a great opportunity to dialogue. And then at the next board meeting after that, I think we schedule the board approval of those. And there's statutory deadlines that we have to hit with that. Okay, so seeing verbal agreements, we'll map that out and then let you look at the calendars. And if there's major conflicts with schedules, we'll try to rework it. Okay? Great.
Any additional items to add to the agenda? We've added enough, so I don't want to ask that question again. So, so our next meeting is scheduled for January 15th at 6:30, regularly scheduled, and then our next one after that is January 29th, 2009 at 6:30. So with the pleasure of the board, I suggest we adjourn this meeting. Right. Thank you so much. Welcome aboard, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks, everybody.